How a slime can survive in Teyvat. Chapter 21-40. Chapter 21, Motherly Love Spoiled. A familiar voice sounded by her ear. Ling Yi finally fell into a slightly cool embrace, carrying a hint of the chilly rain. What met her eyes was a handsome profile. Ling Yi quickly jumped down from Xiao's embrace and clumsily steadied herself. It's you. Thank you. This was the second time Xiao had seen this girl today. Not knowing to run when encountering danger this morning was one thing, but he didn't expect her to be so clumsy as to fall down the stairs in the afternoon. At least she was polite. Xiao also gave Ling Yi a polite nod. Then, with a whoosh, he vanished in the blink of an eye. Ling Yi looked around carefully. Fortunately, no one else was nearby at this hour, otherwise, it would have been quite embarrassing. She quickly left the scene as well. However, Ling Yi didn't head back down to her room. Instead, she went to the top floor terrace, still wanting to give away the almond tofu she had just made. Because of the dense canopy overhead, the rain on the terrace was only a light drizzle, making it easy for Ling Yi to stand and look around. Unfortunately, Xiao wasn't there. Ling Yi looked at the freshly made almond tofu in her bag and tilted her head, wondering if Xiao would take it if she left it on the terrace, or if she should write a note. Meanwhile, Xiao was standing atop the tree looking down. That silly girl was standing in the rain on the terrace instead of seeking shelter. She would catch a cold if she stayed like that. Xiao wanted to go down and warn her, but his karma was unstable today, so he chose to stay further away. Unaware of this, Ling Yi used her elemental sight to search twice. Finding nothing, she gave up. Leaving almond tofu on the terrace felt a bit too much like stalker behavior, so she decided she would surely run into him again later. Back in her room, the thunderstorm was raging outside. Thunder clapped almost every 10 seconds, leaving Ling Yi with no peace. It hadn't seemed like much in the game, but in person, it was quite intense. It felt as if she were facing a heavenly punishment for some heinous crime, comparable to Inajima storm-racked islands. It was truly ridiculous. Just as Ling Yi thought she might have to spend the entire night inside the inn, the noise outside suddenly stopped. The thunderstorm had left as quickly as it had arrived. Ling Yi looked out the window and saw a brilliant rainbow. Such beauty was rare even in the game, and she found herself mesmerized for a moment. The air after the rain was so crisp. Taking a deep breath, her worries vanished, and her fangirl brain went offline as her logic returned. Wasn't there a treasure chest on top of Wangshu Inn? Re-energized, Ling Yi returned to the terrace. Taking advantage of the lack of people, she climbed onto the roof and began jumping between the roof and the branches. She quickly locked onto her target using elemental sight. With a quick reach of her hand, she successfully obtained it. Next was the oculi further out on a branch. This was different from controlling a character in the game where you could slowly nudge an archer forward. Here, it was like walking a tightrope at high altitude. The trees swayed with the wind, and the danger factor skyrocketed. So Ling Yi chose to climb even higher and use her wind glider to fly down. Besides, there was another one by the water wheel and one last one in the pool below. It would be best to collect them all at once. Ling Yi calculated her flight path and prepared to go, unaware of the strange look Xiao was giving her from a corner. The rain had stopped, and Xiao was about to head out to deal with more monsters when he looked up. That girl had somehow climbed onto the roof again and was scaling the branches even higher, swaying precariously in the wind. But there was nothing on the roof. Xiao knew that better than anyone. Was there really something wrong with this girl's head? She couldn't be thinking of ending her life, could she? By now, Ling Yi had reached the highest point and glided steadily to the oculi's position using her wind glider. Okay, got it. Ling Yi changed direction, turning toward the water wheel. She was now directly above the second oculi. A normal descent would take over 10 seconds, and anyone who had grinned the map knew that time was money. So, Ling Yi decisively retracted her wind glider and went into a freefall. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Ling Yi seemed to hear the sound of wind, and then she was intercepted mid-air. This was the second time today Ling Yi found herself in Xiao's arms. Of course, it would have been better if both times weren't so awkward. Ling Yi had long known that only she could see those strange treasure chests in oculi, otherwise, other adventurers would have taken them long ago, right? Some chests weren't even locked. But she had forgotten that in the eyes of others, her resource-gathering behavior looked like that of a lunatic. Ling Yi mentally punched herself. Knowing Xiao was at the inn and still daring to run around like this in broad daylight, she was truly reckless. Landing steadily, Xiao looked at the girl with some helplessness. Are you having some difficulties? Ling Yi looked at Xiao guiltily and brought out her universal excuse again. I'm an adventurer from Fontaine. I was actually just testing my wind glider. Yes, that's it. Xiao clearly didn't believe her pretext. After all, who would completely retract their wind glider and let themselves fall while testing it? Even if it were a mistake, the girl hadn't looked panicked at all during the fall. If he hadn't seen her about to plummet onto the water wheel, he wouldn't have shown himself again. But she didn't look like she was trying to commit suicide either. It seemed there really was something wrong with her head. Xiao asked again, are you alone? Ling Yi didn't understand why he asked, but she could only nod. Though Ling Yi couldn't see any change in Xiao's expression, she could sense he was getting the wrong idea and quickly tried to compensate. That was a close call, thanks to you. I heard you are the Liu Adeptus guarding this place. I didn't expect to actually meet an Adeptus. I'm sorry for causing you trouble, please take this almond tofu as my apology. Ling Yi took the freshly made almond tofu from her bag, handed it to Xiao, and added another sentence. I heard you like this the most, so I prepared it specifically for you. Xiao looked at the almond tofu in his hand, then pulled out the Jueyun chili Ling Yi had given him earlier, and handed them both back to her. I was only doing my duty. You should take these back. There was no way Ling Yi was taking them back, but she couldn't think of a reason to make Xiao accept them comfortably. Then, she made a decision that went against her better judgment, she turned and bolted. Her logic was simple, as long as she ran fast enough, he'd be stuck with the items. Xiao watched the girl run away. Though he didn't understand her behavior, she seemed like a good girl. He had actually wanted to suggest she visit Bubu Pharmacy, but he hadn't felt right saying it out loud. Ling Yi rushed back to Wangshuan to check out. Under the owner's puzzled gaze, she dashed toward Liu Harbor like the wind. She had completely lost face today. Oculi? Treasure chests? She didn't want them anymore, all right. Xiao returned to Wangshuan a moment later, only to find the owner looking at him with a curious expression. What happened to that girl? You certainly gave her a fright. Xiao looked at the owner and voiced his confusion. Perhaps since she was also a woman, she could understand the girl's strange behavior. The owner burst out laughing, her eyes twinkling with hidden meaning. She was looking for you. Can't you tell? Xiao. She came to the terrace even in the rain, naturally, she was there for you. But since you only appeared when she fell down the stairs, I suspect she might have put herself in danger just to draw you out. And didn't you just show up right on cue? Besides, she even prepared your favorite almond tofu in advance. She clearly had it all planned out. Xiao looked at the owner with disapproval. I cannot condone acting so recklessly just to find me. The owner looked at Xiao with frustration. It was rare for a girl to like this blockhead, yet he was hopelessly dense. Meanwhile, the distant Ling Yi was picking sweet flowers on a hillside when she suddenly let out a loud sneeze. Feeling a sudden chill, a strange thought popped into her head. Hey! Who's spreading rumors about me? Chapter 22, The Great Milk Tea Undertaking. Ling Yi spent only half an hour hurriedly stepping into Liu. Although the familiar music was missing, the familiar Chinese-style pavilions, small bridges overflowing water, and festive lanterns before their eyes made Ling Yi feel like they could breathe easily. Now, Ling Yi was staring intently at the man before them. Ah! It's Rex Lapis. With these looks, he's truly worth it. After entering Liu, Ling Yi immediately spotted old Li telling stories, and then Rex Lapis sitting at third-round knockout drinking tea. Ling Yi sighed inwardly, suddenly remembering Venti. No wonder no one believed that fellow when he deliberately claimed to be Barbados in the cathedral. Compared to Zhongli, there really was a difference. That indescribable divinity could not be hidden, even if Zhongli was currently just an ordinary person. On the other hand, this also meant Venti's act was clever enough, he was a representative of being unfathomable. Perhaps even Zhongli couldn't achieve that, after all, Ling Yi couldn't even imagine Rex Lapis acting in an affected or artificial manner. Perhaps Ling Yi's gaze was too intense, as Zhongli actually turned his head away from the stage, his eyes darting straight toward Ling Yi. Ling Yi was startled. Moreover, staring at someone like that was indeed impolite, so they quickly looked away and turned into the nearby Wanman restaurant. Ling Yi didn't plan on contacting Zhongli for the time being. Their clumsy acting would likely be seen through in minutes. Furthermore, Ling Yi didn't intend to join the upcoming plot for now, so it was better to keep some distance. If they got too close to the scene, they would likely be the most conspicuous suspicious person nearby and would be questioned by the Millilith in no time. Not to mention their identity was hard to verify, such questioning would waste a lot of time. This would be detrimental to Ling Yi's great milk tea plan. A brainstorm whirled in Ling Yi's mind, and they spoke up. Boss, I'd like to see what you're selling here. Chef Mao immediately handed over a menu, and Ling Yi looked down to make their selection. Liu is considered a commercial center, so the prices were very favorable. Ling Yi bought many ingredients and recipes. Storing everything in their backpack, Ling Yi turned toward the nearby chop suey stall. Compared to the piping hot dishes of Wanman restaurant, this kind of chop suey appealed more to Ling Yi. After eating toast for over 10 days, Ling Yi had long been unable to resist wanting a few bites. This is the authentic flavor. While Ling Yi was eating happily, they didn't notice that Zhongli's eyes hadn't left them since he first saw them. However, Ling Yi's mind was currently filled with plans for traversing the map. After finishing the last bite, they prepared to set off again. Although Liu Harbor was nice, the main production areas for milk and tea, the primary ingredients for milk tea, were over by Kinky Village. Furthermore, Ling Yi planned to innovate by adding some Kingsin and Violet Grass, combining the game with reality. And as for how difficult the mountains there are to climb, I believe every newbie has experienced it deeply. Ling Yi didn't want to climb mountains in the dark. In reality, once night fell, visibility was nowhere near as clear as in the game. Often, Ling Yi had to rely on the map and elemental sight to traverse, but they couldn't move while elemental sight was active, which greatly affected efficiency. Since they had gone to fight the pure water spirit last time, Ling Yi had already unlocked many waypoints. So this time, Ling Yi first found a deserted spot to teleport to Kinky Village, and then took a shortcut from there to Jueyun Karst. Although tea leaves aren't obtainable in the game, there are NPCs selling Pop's tea. From this, it can be inferred that tea leaves are also obtainable. The map for Chennai Vale hadn't been opened yet, and Ling Yi couldn't break through the boundary to enter the outer map. But this didn't stop Ling Yi from looking for a peddler to stock up. Ling Yi's target was Uncle Kai in Kinky Village. Although there are NPCs in Liu Harbor who sell Pop's tea, Kinky Village is closer to the source, so the prices would be better. Thus, Ling Yi arrived in front of Uncle Kai's house. Uncle Kai was a white-haired old man who lived alone and made a living mainly by selling tea. He lived a simple life. Seeing Ling Yi walking up from a distance, he started greeting Ling Yi to come and sit before they even spoke. Good girl from afar, come and try some pop's tea. Ling Yi naturally wouldn't refuse and bought a bowl to try first. The taste was sweet and refreshing, the aroma lingering around the nose for a long time. Although it was green tea, Ling Yi was very satisfied, even feeling that using such tea leaves for milk tea might be a bit of a waste. Then, they made their request to Uncle Kai. Can I buy a few kilograms of tea leaves? Uncle Kai naturally sold tea leaves as well and nodded with a smile. Then Ling Yi bought nearly 100 caddies of tea leaves. Because Kinky Village is remote and few people visit, Uncle Kai's tea didn't sell well, and he had quite a bit left. This time, he sold almost all of it to Ling Yi. Having obtained the tea leaves, Ling Yi was in a great mood. The most difficult part of the great milk tea undertaking was complete, so the rest would be much simpler. Ling Yi bid farewell to Uncle Kai and dashed toward Jueyun Karst, striving to light up the statue of the seven before the sun went down, and then returned to Liu to find an inn to rest. However, Ling Yi clearly overestimated themselves. If the mountains in Mondstadt were modified by Venti, such that the height of every mountain was within the range Ling Yi could climb before exhausting their stamina, then the mountains in Liu were just tossed around by Zhongli. They were characterized by being seemingly endless, even climbing along the mountain paths left Ling Yi huffing and puffing. Even with a full stamina bar, Ling Yi expressed that they simply couldn't climb anymore. For someone who failed an 80-meter sprint, what a huge DMG this was. Ling Yi sat down to rest next to a COR lapis. Ores were really too hard, they couldn't be mined at all. Ling Yi had to swing 8 times just to mine the COR lapis. This was having the style of a claymore without the strength of a claymore. Stamina dropped rapidly. Then Ling Yi watched the sun slowly slip from the sky. The Hilichurls not far away had already lain down where they were, and Ling Yi could only prop their head in their hands and sigh at the moon. Let alone King's Inn, those violet grass grew so high that even if Ling Yi saw them, they didn't want to climb up to pick them. But the distance to the statue of the seven was only a little over 100 meters away, a direct distance of over 100 meters. Ling Yi didn't want to climb it again, which was why they had fallen into such an awkward situation. Looking up, the red glow of the statue of the seven was very prominent in the night sky, yet it was so near and yet so far. Ling Yi, oh Ling Yi, keep going. After cheering themselves up, Ling Yi tried to reach the summit again. They first calculated resting spots, cleared out the monsters nearby that could disturb them, and finally made a few stamina dishes to replenish at any time. If someone were watching from a distance at this moment, they would see a small black dot crawling up the towering Jueyun Karst at a miraculous speed, definitely worthy of being called a new era Jueyun Karst urban legend. Chapter 23, Contract. After last night's fatal mountain climbing trip, Ling Yi was now fast asleep in a Liu Inn. If it weren't for the persistent bang 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 of knocking at the door, Ling Yi felt she could have kept sleeping. But at this hour? At this time? Who would come looking for her? Ling Yi couldn't imagine who was outside, and although she hadn't responded for a long while, the knocking never stopped. Finally, Ling Yi tidied her clothes and hurried to open the door. Standing outside was someone Ling Yi could never have expected. So why on earth was Zhongli standing at her door? Ling Yi stammered, truly not knowing what to say. You, hello. Zhongli remained calm and composed. You are too polite, young friend. My name is Zhongli, a consultant of the Wangshang funeral parlor. I have come today to discuss a certain matter with you. With the Archon speaking, Ling Yi naturally didn't dare disobey. She quickly invited him in and took a bowl of tea from her backpack to serve him. Although this bowl of tea was completely beneath Zhongli's status, Ling Yi couldn't exactly give Zhongli fruit juice, could she? Zhongli was very polite as well, not minding the coarseness of the tea, and picked up the bowl to take a light sip. Good tea. Thank you, young friend. Looking at the elegant Archon, Ling Yi could only think to herself, I'm sweating bullets here, folks. What's the difference between this and a criminal sitting in a police station? I wonder if Mr. Zhongli has something he needs from me. Zhongli didn't beat around the bush, pulling out a contract and handing it to Ling Yi. I wish to enter into a contract with you. A contract? Ling Yi was even more bewildered. What kind of business could she have with the Archon? She didn't have 2 cents worth of value to her name, she wouldn't even be worth much if she were sold. Ling Yi looked carefully at the so-called contract, her brain tying itself in knots the more she read. What was all this? Did Zhongli mistake her for some strange god? Archon? I don't quite seem to understand. What does not affecting the development of Liu mean? Zhongli crossed his arms and looked at Ling Yi. Since you already know my identity, you should also understand that I noticed you the moment you stepped into Liu harbor. Although you seem to have no intention of contending for Liu, since you have entered Liu, you must abide by my rules. In truth, this is merely a letter of guarantee, ensuring you will not pose a threat to Liu. Wow. Archon, you really think too highly of me. Even if I really wanted to cause trouble, I don't have the ability. However, Ling Yi also realized that in Zhongli's eyes, she probably looked more like an external wild god. Since there was a potential threat, it naturally had to be kept under control, so this paper contract seemed quite reasonable, didn't it? Ling Yi had absolutely no reason to refuse. Although Zhongli looked easy to talk to right now, Ling Yi believed that if even half a no left her mouth, she'd be tossed into the seabed today to keep Oziel company. Ling Yi very readily signed her name on the paper. Zhongli put away the contract, having also stamped his own name on it. Ling Yi caught a glimpse, it was a golden Morux. Then I shall not disturb you further. I'll take my leave for now. Of course, if you encounter any difficulties, you may come to the Wangsheng funeral parlor to find me. Ling Yi complained in her heart, how did I even have the nerve? After watching Zhongli leave the inn's main door, Ling Yi was so spooked that all traces of sleepiness had vanished. She lay on the bed with a blank expression. Looking at it this way, Venti is still a bit better. At least he won't knock on your door early in the morning to give you a massive surprise. But it's actually quite logical. After all, the plot where the Geo Archon fakes his death is coming up soon. If she really had any bad intentions, she could take advantage of the situation once the Geo Archon died. Zhongli wouldn't let external influences interfere with his plan. Ling Yi thought about it and realized it wasn't without benefits. After all, she had been wondering if she should participate in Liu's main storyline to get on the Kixing's good side, which would make installing a vending machine in Liu much easier. But since Zhongli didn't want her involved, then... she could slack off openly now. Let the traveler go up to Jueyun Karst to seek the Adepti and down to Liu to pick flowers and find rocks, in short, I get to enjoy my leisure. She went out to have morning tea. After Ling Yi finished recharging her energy, she planned to head towards Fontaine. Trying to find an automated machine in the first 4 nations was truly whimsical, so Ling Yi's task was still to explore the map. Ling Yi calculated her pace. To get to Fontaine, she had to cross Simuru and the vast desert, and the roads weren't easy to travel. She'd likely have to take a long detour. Perhaps she could barely make it before the rite of parting was completed. And just as Ling Yi left Liu for Simuru, the traveler finally hurried into Liu. Little Paimon was almost dazzled by the bustling harbor before her eyes. Traveler. This place is really completely different from Mondstadt. I just wonder if Miss Ling Yi came here too. Didn't we hear from Venti that Ling Yi headed to Liu a step ahead of us? Ether nodded. The lively atmosphere on the streets was indeed very different from Mondstadt, with the endless sounds of vendors calling out. However, the most important thing was to find Catherine first to register his information. As for Miss Ling Yi, Ether believed that since she considered herself the greatest adventurer, the Adventurers Guild would naturally have corresponding news. Maybe just like in Mondstadt, she had already become famous here over the past few days. But Ether was destined to be disappointed, because Liu's Catherine actually said she had never seen Ling Yi at all, and Ling Yi hadn't even registered in Liu. Even little Paimon couldn't believe it. If Ling Yi hadn't come to the Adventurers Guild to register, could she have run into some trouble? How can that be? Miss Ling Yi is the greatest adventurer. If she reached Liu, how could she not have come? Could there be a mistake? Catherine checked the registry again and gave a negative answer once more. Out of necessity, Ether and Paimon could only leave for now, planning to search for Ling Yi while participating in the rite of dissension. After all, Ling Yi would definitely come to the rite of dissension, right? But Ether was destined to be disappointed. Ling Yi, whose heart and eyes were only on her milk tea empire, was currently flying along with 4-leaf sigils. Wow! This is so awesome! It's just like a roller coaster. Whoosh, and you're at a new spot. There's a strong sense of being pushed back into your seat like in a race car, it's addictive. Of course, Ling Yi wouldn't admit that she hadn't mastered the direction the first time she used it and almost flew too far, crashing into some vines. Soon, Ling Yi had arrived at Port Ormus. The fresh scent inherent to the rainforest made Ling Yi feel refreshed all over, and even the mushrooms were very cute. She just wondered if these mushrooms were edible. In the game, there were only simple harvestable mushrooms or starshrooms, but in reality, Ling Yi could see dozens of different kinds of mushrooms just by glancing down. They looked very tempting. Of course, Ling Yi didn't dare pick them randomly. Normal poisonous mushrooms would at most cause hallucinations, but if she ate a red umbrella, white stem kind, her life could be over right then and there. So she could probably only look with longing. What was even more troubling was the withered forest before her. The familiar withering zone made Ling Yi feel it was quite an eyesore. How about doing a good deed first and clearing this whole area out? Chapter 24, Robbery. Completely caught off guard, the red attack came suddenly. Ling Yi was directly struck by the attack from above. Whoa! Why is this flower growing on top of a branch? And isn't its aggro range a bit too far? Before Ling Yi could even complain, the next attack had already arrived. Dendro Seed, where are you? Ling Yi dodged the homing attack with a sprint and looked around, but there was no sign of any Dendro Seed. Suddenly, a familiar green arrow whistled past Ling Yi's ear, striking a fungus not far away. Please don't come any closer, hide nearby. A green figure joined the fray a step ahead of Ling Yi. It was Tainari. For a moment, Ling Yi was moved to tears. As a perpetual victim of hard pity who had always wanted to lose the 50/50ths to Tainari, Ling Yi had never managed to pull him before transmigrating. Instead, Master Diluc was already at C6. Although Ling Yi really wanted to cooperate with Master Tainari to play a Bloom meta team, neither side's Hydro or Dendro application capabilities were very strong. Using the slime's giant bubble skill could, at most, be considered a bit of crowd control. With a slip of the hand, Ling Yi even almost hit Master Tainari, and by the time the battle ended, only 2 lonely Dendro Seed had popped out. In short, the state of this battle was simply disastrous. However, Tainari did not mean to blame Ling Yi, instead, he stepped forward to greet her warmly. I am Tainari, a ranger. It turns out you are also a vision wielder. Thank you for your support just now, but you still shouldn't get too close to this kind of withering zone. A vision can only resist it briefly. If you feel unwell, please tell me immediately. Hearing this, Ling Yi felt quite embarrassed. Aside from causing trouble just now, she hadn't actually helped with anything, yet she was being thanked. You're way too nice. Hello, hello. I am Ling Yi, a very powerful adventurer from Fontaine. I actually know about these withering zones, so you don't need to worry about me. I was just caught off guard by a sneak attack just now. Tainari's ear twitched to the side, seemingly not quite believing Ling Yi's words. After all, there had been no shortage of adventurers over the years who had barged into the rainforest relying on their visions, only to be sent running by withering zones or to collapse by the roadside after eating poisonous mushrooms. This overly young lady before him seemed no different from those people, not to mention that her ornate and complex long dress wouldn't it really get snagged in the rainforest? He then suggested, actually, I still recommend that Miss Ling Yi stick to the main road and avoid taking risks on the small paths. Ling Yi also knew that her performance just now where her skills had fumbled because she was too excited to see Tainari had made a deep impression on him. She had likely been categorized as unreliable. So, it was time to show some true strength. Ahem, don't doubt me. I'm actually very well adapted to life in the rainforest. I once spent only 3 days traveling through the entire Sumura rainforest. Specifically, referring to the 3 days spent jumping around while completing the Aranyaka. And I've also gathered many Rukhashava mushrooms and special star shrooms that grow in dangerous places. Meaning, climbing up and down between paddy fields, jungles, and giant trees using 4-leaf sigils. Most importantly, I have the strength of an excellent adventurer. Whether it's treasure hoarders or fungus, I can easily defeat them. This was a tribute to the mobs that were innocently beaten up while she was farming the overworld for treasure chests. Tainari touched his ear, feeling as if he had heard something he didn't quite understand. Although these words sounded ordinary, coming from the mouth of the lady before him, it somehow made her sound like a robber even more dangerous than the treasure hoarders. Still, having the strength to protect oneself was always a good thing. As long as he didn't have to pick her up somewhere in the jungle, it was a victory. Tainari finally nodded and advised Ling Yi, then, lady, I must continue my patrol. Please be careful. Ling Yi also planned to continue forward and waved goodbye to Tainari. However, perhaps because the path Ling Yi chose today was indeed not very good, she soon ran into a second withering zone. Even though Ling Yi clearly remembered that in the game, no withering zone had ever appeared here. But then again, she wasn't afraid, so it didn't matter, right? Grabbing a dendro seed, she unleashed a flurry of attacks on the red flowers. Ling Yi stood directly outside the attack range to clear away all the other branches, then lured the mobs out for a beating, and finally strolled in leisurely to clear the tumor of the withering. Focusing on being clean and efficient. Touching the treasure chest, Ling Yi continued forward. Since she was now near the river, she activated a wave rider waypoint and experienced another boat drift. Although it was indeed hard to master the direction at first, after crashing many times driving many times practice made perfect. Bumping along like this, Ling Yi finally crossed the rainforest and reached the edge of the desert. The first thing she felt was discomfort, the temperature rose instantly. It immediately reminded Ling Yi of some unpleasant things. Moreover, having walked all this way, it was now evening, and Ling Yi estimated it was still about 40 degrees. If it were noon, wouldn't it soar to 60? Ling Yi sheepishly retracted the foot she had stepped out with. Perhaps she needed to stay in Sumura for a couple more days. Ling Yi decided to travel at night and return to the rainforest to rest via the waypoints during the day, focusing on a balance of work and rest. However, Ling Yi clearly hadn't considered everything. Or rather, a greenhouse flower like her had absolutely no experience with wilderness survival and tended to overestimate her own strength. The night in the desert was so cold it made Ling Yi feel as if she were back on a snowy mountain. The only difference was that the mountain was damp and cold, while the desert was bone dry. Unfortunately, despite having a backpack full of supplies, Ling Yi couldn't find a single piece of clothing. At most, she could drink soup to stay warm. But soon, even worse luck was waiting for Ling Yi. It had to be admitted that the path Ling Yi chose was indeed the most convenient and fastest route, not even requiring her to climb high mountains. But she should have realized that such a prime location would naturally have treasure hoarders stationed there. That's right. Ling Yi, clutching her frozen, red head, ran wildly and plunged headlong into a treasure hoarder's camp. This wasn't like the game where you could handle them tent by tent, and they wouldn't attack as long as you weren't in their aggro range. When Ling Yi looked up, there was a dense crowd of people in the distance, so many she couldn't count them all at once. In the next moment, countless treasure hoarders had already gathered their weapons and were surrounding Ling Yi. After all, this lady, who appeared weak and was all alone, looked like she had quite a bit of money. Ling Yi's anger also reached its peak. The waypoints were just ahead, there was no way she was turning back after running this far. So be it. Want to rob me? No. I'm the one who's going to rob you. Chapter 25, Listen to my excuses. Ling Yi pulled out a 2-meter-long claymore from behind her back. Using Noel's cue. A brilliant geo-element covered the claymore. Take this, my 40-meter-long blade. 10 minutes later. Ling Yi was huffing and puffing, her hands as limp as noodles, and the claymore had already been tossed into the sand by her. In front of Ling Yi, a dozen members of the treasure hoarders were still standing, but their eyes flickered with hesitation, not daring to step forward. After all, who would dare fight a seemingly fragile but violent damselette who could perform a super whirlwind? Because Ling Yi's ATK wasn't high, she relied entirely on brute force to scrape them for 10 minutes, only to see a final score of 0 kills. It was enough to bring tears to one's eyes. It felt like playing on a cursed account. Finally, Ling Yi shouted with a dark expression, "Make way." Seeing Ling Yi, whose resentment was heavier than a ghost's, the treasure hoarders in front of her retreated in unison, and under everyone's gaze, Ling Yi walked step by step toward the distant waypoints. She could even hear rustling discussions behind her, mixed with things like the Lion of the Desert and King Deshret's blessing and so on. Ling Yi, however, felt very wronged. "I just wanted to go to Fontaine, is it that hard for me?" Reaching out a trembling hand, Ling Yi finally clicked on the long-awaited waypoints. No longer bothering to hide, she teleported directly back to Port Ormus, wanting nothing more than to lie down on the spot. The soft grass and the fresh, sweet air were indeed refreshing. Ling Yi wasn't picky, she found a spot under the shade of a tree and prepared to rest. Wait. Sweet air? Ling Yi immediately realized something and tried to get up to leave, but a mysterious hallucination appeared before her eyes. Her hand, which she had just raised, fell back down uncontrollably. "World, forget me. Ah. Greater Lord Rukhadevata, please stop chanting." Ling Yi couldn't last even a minute and eventually lay on the grass, losing consciousness. When Ling Yi opened her eyes the next day, the familiar Tainari was by the bedside, looking at her with a complicated expression. After all, Ling Yi's words about how she would absolutely not get into trouble seemed to still be echoing in his ears. Ling Yi. What great adventurer. She was more like a profligate son who had run away from home. Ling Yi knew that her image as a big talker in Tainari's heart might be hard to erase now. "Little Ti, listen to my excuses." "No, I mean my explanation. I really didn't eat some poisonous mushroom and faint. I wasn't knocked down and robbed by treasure hoarders either. And I certainly wasn't chased and bitten by crocodiles in the river." But when the words reached her lips, Ling Yi swallowed them back down. "Forget it, an explanation is just a cover-up, and a cover-up is the truth." Ling Yi felt she had understood this principle very clearly within her first few days here. Seeing that Ling Yi was awake, Tainari immediately handed over a cup of strange herbal medicine he had prepared long ago and said, "It was the scholar Hypatia who found you and sent word to me, so I went to bring you back. However, I didn't find any wounds on you. Did something happen yesterday?" Ling Yi looked at Tainari with a pitiful expression and responded cautiously, "Would you believe me if I said I was knocked out by Hypatia's incense?" Tainari didn't give the pitiful Ling Yi any extra attention. Perhaps there were simply too many people who fainted in the rainforest for various reasons and were picked up every day. Ling Yi was just one of many. What Tainari wanted to know was how to better prescribe the right medicine for the symptoms. "In that case, please continue to rest in Port Ormus for a while." Rest? Ling Yi thought about it. If she didn't agree to Tainari, with his responsible nature, he would probably force her to stay for treatment. In the end, this could be considered a sweet burden. Finally, Ling Yi nodded obediently. During their conversation, a green-haired girl lifted the curtain and walked in. "Master Tainari, several rangers have returned, saying they've discovered more withering zones." Tainari frowned and quickly left the tent. Ling Yi naturally heard this as well. The situation in Sumeru indeed seemed far from optimistic. Her eyes subconsciously drifted toward Kali. Kali looked far less healthy than she did in the game, her face was pale, she lacked energy, and she even walked unsteadily. Ling Yi looked at Kali's neck and cuffs, where faint black lines were indeed visible. This was Eliezer. "Hello, I am trainee ranger Kali. Master Tainari said you cannot leave yet, so please stay here peacefully for a few days. I will be responsible for taking care of you." But Ling Yi was actually mostly recovered. How should she put it? A player's body was tough, just eating a fried egg could turn them from critically injured to lively and jumping. So, Ling Yi downed the herbal medicine in one go and jumped off the bed. "Don't worry, I'm perfectly fine. I just need to be observed for 2 more days, that's all." Kali quickly stopped Ling Yi. There had been precedents where people thought they were fine, ran out on their own, and ended up fainting on the road again, so Kali didn't dare let Ling Yi run around alone. "No, Master said you still need to rest." Ling Yi didn't want to make things difficult for Kali and said, "How about this? I see you have a lot to do, and I'm someone who can't sit still. Why don't I go with you? I'm an adventurer who can do 20 commissions a day, I'm very good at all sorts of things." Seeing that Ling Yi indeed looked very energetic, Kali could only nod in agreement, otherwise she really might not be able to stop her. "Then for today, what's left is cleaning the statue of the 7. Is that okay?" This was right up her alley, since Ling Yi herself was a hydro slime. Ling Yi familiarly took Kali's hand and moved toward the statue of the 7 as if she knew the way by heart. However, Ling Yi had other thoughts in her mind at the moment. "Your name is Kali, right? Did you grow up in Port Ormus?" Kali waved her hands, seemingly reluctant to bring up the past, but she still politely answered Ling Yi, "I didn't grow up in Port Ormus. To be precise, I came here for medical treatment." Ling Yi pretended not to know and continued to ask, "Treatment? Is Kali suffering from some very serious illness?" "Actually, I'm also quite good at healing. Maybe I can take a look for you." Kali became even more uneasy and just shook her head, "Master Tainari has been treating me all along, so I won't trouble you." Happening to arrive below the statue of the 7, Kali quickly changed the subject, "We're here. Could I trouble you to clean the top of the statue? I'm not very good at climbing." Ling Yi wasn't in a hurry and agreed to Kali's request. As for climbing, ever since her last trip to Jueyun Karst, Ling Yi was almost immune to the difficulty. As long as it wasn't a 45-degree overhanging cliff, she was confident she could climb it in one go. Ling Yi stood on the side of the statue, and gentle hydro element flowed slowly from her hands. It suddenly gave Ling Yi the illusion that she was giving Mahida a bath. After wiping it clean, she quickly jumped down. After being busy for a while, Ling Yi helped Kali clear out a few fungus, and the two finally sat down by a nearby campfire to rest. I brought a bento today, do you want to try some? You might not be used to it. The black, rock-hard charcoal-baked Ajilinak cakes gave off the vibe of a dark cuisine. Just as Nouvelette couldn't understand them, Ling Yi, as half a Lio local, couldn't understand them either. She would rather choose Xiangling's slime-flavored mushroom stir-fry. Ling Yi politely declined, saying they were just okay, then pulled some Liu delicacies, crystal shrimp, directly from her backpack and stuffed a portion of golden shrimp balls into Kali's hands. As a qualified adventurer, I am naturally a qualified chef. I don't know if you are used to Liu cuisine, but if you don't like it, I have Mondstadt food too. Kali looked at the golden shrimp balls in front of her, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the favor. She had been sent honey roast by Amber when they exchanged letters, but because of her health, she hadn't had many chances to encounter Liu cuisine. She didn't expect such a grand dish upon their first meeting. Port Ormus didn't have shrimp meat for sale, so it was even rarer. Kali looked at Ling Yi gratefully. Thank you, I will make sure to finish it all. Seeing Kali's happy expression, Ling Yi felt a great sense of achievement. After the meal, the two returned to Port Ormus together, only to be told of a major event. Tighnari was missing. Chapter 26, The Cave. Kali immediately grew anxious. Master was an experienced ranger, how could he be easily defeated by the dangers in the rainforest? Ling Yi steadied the panicked Kali with a hand and asked the three who had returned, how did Master Tighnari disappear? The three were actually rangers as well, but they didn't have visions. Thus, there were many places covered by withering zones that they couldn't reach and had to rely on Tighnari to clear. It was for the same reason this time, but they hadn't expected an accident to occur. We asked Ranger Tighnari for help clearing a withering zone just like before, but unexpectedly, a massive mechanical monster suddenly lunged out from the nearby woods. Enormous missiles rained down from the sky, so Tighnari had to come back to protect us first. But just then, a large hole suddenly appeared, and Tighnari fell in. We were being chased by that giant flying machine and couldn't even look back, so we ran for our lives to get back here. Ling Yi looked at the three supporting each other, it was clear they were badly injured. Ling Yi responded immediately. Please tell me the location of the accident. I have a vision, so I can go help rescue him. Hearing this, although they knew they shouldn't leave the rescue to an outsider, it was the best option right now. If they went to find others for help, it might be too late. Kali was also anxious to help upon hearing this, I'm familiar with that area, I'll go with you. Cough, cough. Perhaps due to being too agitated, Kali's body suddenly became unsteady, coughing incessantly, and losing strength until nearly sliding to the ground. Ling Yi reacted quickly, catching Kali and placing him on a nearby stool. Don't worry, I'm a very powerful adventurer, and Tighnari is no ordinary person either. Perhaps by the time I get there, I'll find that everything has already been resolved. Wait here peacefully, I promise I'll bring him back before tonight. Kali knew he couldn't push himself and could only look at Ling Yi expectantly, I believe in you. You must be careful too. Ling Yi nodded to everyone, looked toward a distant four-leaf sigil, and quickly ran toward the destination. Ling Yi already had a plan in mind. It wasn't unusual to encounter ruin guards near Port Ormus. As for the sudden hole, that was even less surprising. I bet not a single mountain in Sumeru is solid, it's truly thanks to Lesser Lord Qzanali's protection that none have collapsed yet. Looking at the location marked on the map, Ling Yi was very familiar with these places. Beneath this area was a long passage, which was part of the Aranyaka. But this was also what Ling Yi found hardest to accept, the three normal entrances all required the power of the Aranara and had to be opened with music. How did Tighnari fall in from somewhere else? It couldn't be that someone was using cheats, right? Soon, Ling Yi arrived at the site of the accident. There were numerous marks from shell attacks on the ground, and the scorched yellow grass had yet to recover, but by the edge of a pool, two lonely materials lay on the ground. In other words, before I arrived, the ruin hunter had been defeated. But, pyro element? Ling Yi didn't recall any pyro element characters in Sumeru who would be here. Dia should still be with Taya, barring any surprises. However, now was not the time to think about that. Ling Yi looked toward the pitch-black cave entrance. There were no signs of manual excavation, it seemed as if the loose soil had simply been shaken open by the shelling. The entrance was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, barely enough for one person to pass through. Once someone fell in, they probably really couldn't get back up. Ling Yi could only comfort themselves that there were still entrances that could be unlocked with just a dendro-elemental monument, otherwise, if Tighnari had to return the way he came, Ling Yi might actually have to dig a tunnel. Jumping down the hole, the narrow passage was not smooth. Ling Yi had to slowly shuffle down bit by bit. The further down, the harder it was to move. Even though several minutes had passed since Ling Yi began the descent, the bottom was still nowhere in sight. Ling Yi tapped on the nearby walls, the sound was muffled. There were no exits around, nor any response from anyone else. This made Ling Yi even more curious about where this passage ultimately led. After an unknown amount of time, Ling Yi finally saw a glimmer of light, which seemed to be glowing starshrooms growing underground. With a slight effort, Ling Yi landed successfully. The surroundings were eerily quiet. There weren't even common monsters, nor was there the iconic giant tree. More importantly, the scene before Ling Yi's eyes didn't trigger any familiar memories. Was it because finishing the Aranyaka was too painful that I have no memory of this? But after 3 seconds, Ling Yi was certain, this was a place they hadn't explored in the game. Because as soon as they looked up, they saw 3 exposed luxurious treasure chests. If such a place existed, how could I not remember it? Ling Yi observed the surroundings. There was no path behind, so that could be ruled out. The nearby grass showed signs of being trampled, suggesting someone might have rested here. However, what worried Ling Yi was that several dendro element arrows lay in a corner, indicating there had been a battle. But Tighnari was nowhere to be seen. The interior of the massive cave had a huge vertical drop, yet not a single 4-leaf sigil was in sight. Some rocks were even floating. Ling Yi knew at a glance that they couldn't climb up. Looking down, there was a bottomless pool where something seemed to be swimming, with ripples slowly undulating on the surface. There might be something big underwater. Ling Yi didn't plan on dragging it out for a fight of hundreds of rounds. With their tickle level DMG, it was uncertain who would end up feeding whom. The main goal now was Tighnari. Tighnari, oh Tighnari, where could you have gone in this situation? Ling Yi didn't believe Tighnari could have fallen from above unprepared without getting injured. But why would an injured person choose to scout ahead instead of resting and waiting for rescue? Even if scouting, he should have left markers. Tighnari couldn't have failed to think of that. Then there was only one possibility, something happened here that forced Tighnari to choose flight immediately without time to rest. Ling Yi looked up again at the luxurious treasure chests high above. Generally, games place rewards commensurate with the difficulty, yet these 3 chests weren't even locked, sitting exposed within reach. Activating elemental sight. Sure enough, there were strange spherical creatures underwater. They were white, indicating they were interactive, but had no element. Everywhere else was a uniform black. Ling Yi could only choose to move along the edge, fearing they might enter the attack range of the underwater monster. But after completing a circuit, Ling Yi understood Tighnari's choice. This cave looked large, but it was actually a dead end with no exit. And the only possibility lay underwater. Chapter 27, The Doctor. In that case, what else can be done? It's just a fight, just ask any level 6 pro. Solving puzzles? No. Remember the locations for gathering materials? Don't remember. Can I fight? Just tell me how many digits of damage you want. Ling Yi opened the system, quickly adjusted the artifact system, and put on the best set. Drawing a longbow from his back, he fired 3 arrows at the reflection in the water. Soon, a long red health bar appeared at the very top of the screen. And the name of this boss was... Fatui creation? Ling Yi's thoughts instantly returned to the surface. That trace of pyro element, could it be a pyro slinger from the Fatui? And that ruin hunter seemed to be one of the sealed ones nearby. So was it lured here after its seal was broken by the pyro element? But the Fatui and Sumeru are... The Doctor? Ling Yi really didn't expect that instead of meeting La Signora in Mondstadt, he would first have a love-hate struggle with the Doctor. But the Doctor's goal naturally couldn't be Tighnari. So, is it Kali? Ling Yi looked at the giant monster emerging from the water. A creature like a fleshy tumor was connected to the surrounding trees everywhere, used to absorb nearby energy to supply itself. Just staring at it felt extremely uncomfortable. After the 3 arrows just now, the health bar above the monster's head didn't decrease at all, the attack was ineffective. Ling Yi recalled that when doing the Aranyaka quest, there should have been a withered giant tree in the cave above. So, is there a connection between the two? But at this moment, Ling Yi decided to leave for now. Since Tighnari was no longer inside the cave, there was a high probability he had already found another way out. Now that the monster wasn't dead, Tighnari could only have bypassed it, but there was no one left guarding Kali's side. Ling Yi didn't hesitate, opened the map to teleport Port Ormus. Coming out from the waypoints, Ling Yi's expression changed, and he quickly hit his figure. Just a few meters ahead, a Fatui squad was resting. With just a quick glance, Ling Yi saw 3 squads stationed in different positions. Geocantors, Anemo boxers, cryogunners, electro-hammers, pyro-slingers, Chechen mages, almost every type of Fatui was present. But the good news was, he didn't see the Doctor himself. Ling Yi leaned in to listen. The hydrogunner in the distance seemed to be the leader of this squad and was complaining about something. Coming all this way, if it weren't for the Harbinger's orders, I wouldn't have come. The geocantor nearby was also exhausted, sitting slumped on the ground. Stop it, Captain. Let's rest for a bit. I heard from above that there's going to be a big operation this time, a blitzkrieg. We have to head back after we're done. The more Ling Yi listened, the more anxious he became. Relying on himself alone, he might not be able to protect Kali. The Fatui's current world level was 4, and he was also at this level now. However, he lacked a main DPS for primary output. Even if he could block them, he wouldn't be able to deal effective DMG. Helplessly, Ling Yi opened the gacha system again, hoping the luck he had accumulated last time hadn't disappeared. Although he didn't have enough for a 10 pull, Ling Yi still intended to give it a try. Who says a single pull can't create a miracle? 1 pull. Blue. Another pull, still blue. Ling Yi looked at the only 2 remaining orbs. Move out. Just as Ling Yi was hesitating, the Fatui nearby had all stood up and were gathering in the direction of Port Ormus. And the source of the voice. Ling Yi's pupils constricted. The Doctor had actually come in person. Although the one in front of Ling Yi was only the young doctor and didn't look very old, his strength was not to be underestimated. Did he really have a chance of winning? There was no time to hesitate. Ling Yi's hands didn't stop. The last pole was purple. When the power possessed Ling Yi's body, he had already rushed out. A violent pyro element descended from the sky, accompanied by wild winds, blowing down an entire squad on the spot. The hydro element followed immediately. The double attack multiplier made Ling Yi's attack very effective. Ling Yi had already boosted his elemental mastery to over 500. The Fatui were thrown into disarray by the sudden attack, and the remaining two squads also closed in from both sides. Ling Yi didn't panic at all. This scene was not even as good as floor 11 of the spiral abyss. Moreover, with the pyro element in hand and his own versatile hydro element vaporize, frozen, shatter, melt, there was always one that would suit them. Since ancient times, attacks should target healers and supports first. Ling Yi quickly moved through the front line and rushed straight to the rear. Hydro plus cryo, frozen. Enmo element swirl, pyro element infusion. Soon, a large number of Fatui fell before they even had time to activate their shields. The young doctor stood on high ground, face-palming with a look of mostly impatience in his eyes. He knew that his mission this time would probably not be completed. But originally, being made to do this kind of thing by that guy was already very annoying, and encountering such strong resistance made the young doctor almost instantly want to quit. With this kind of time, it would be better to go and learn a couple more pieces of knowledge. Alright, stop fighting. Consider this our loss. How about we both take a step back? The young doctor walked down from the mountain. Ling Yi also stopped his movements but remained on guard, not putting down his weapon. Ling Yi's view of the doctor was still stuck in the period of the Sumera god creation, where he was overbearing. But looking at it now, it seemed that other segments of the doctor were not as powerful. Actually, being able to stop the fighting was something Ling Yi was naturally happy about, but this could never solve the problem. The doctor would still target Kali. Only when the Eliezer disappeared on its own would it be considered completely resolved, but before that, there was still a long time. Take a step back? How will you take a step back? The young doctor made a gesture, and the remaining Fatui retreated behind him. I believe you have already seen my sincerity. I actually didn't want to come and do this crappy job. I can withdraw the troops. Why don't you let us go this time? I can see you're not from Port Ormus either. Moreover, I saw it, you have secrets on you. How about I keep them for you? Ling Yi's expression changed. Just now, to save people, he had exposed that he possessed multiple elemental powers. But thinking carefully, perhaps for Kali, he himself was also a suitable experimental subject. But the young doctor? Truly trustworthy? Ling Yi's understanding of the doctor's segments was mostly that most segments looked down on others, so they mostly didn't share information. But looking at the one in front of him, he probably hadn't grown to the stage of being interested in human experimentation, meaning before he was expelled from the academia. Fine. Ling Yi decided to play it safe for now. Moreover, in the original plot, even without him coming to Sumeru, Kali would still be fine. So Ling Yi was still inclined to believe that this crisis would be successfully weathered. The doctor was very true to his word, turning around to command the rest of the Fatui to leave, but he himself walked up to Ling Yi. It would be a lie to say he wasn't curious. One must have a vision to wield elemental power, and at most one type. Yet this person easily used several types of elemental power. The doctor did not see Ling Yi's vision. So, in other words, one can use elemental power without a vision? Ling Yi also stared closely at the young doctor who walked up to him. Hello, I am the Fatui Harbinger, the doctor. Can we be friends? Chapter 28, Kali's Crisis. Friends? I have no need to make friends with a Fatui Harbinger. Ling Yi rejected the young doctor coldly. Besides, after the Sumera storyline ends, all these segments will be destroyed, making it even less necessary to make this friend. The young doctor wasn't annoyed, he simply waved his hand. Fine, the Fatui's reputation is indeed poor. But if you ever need my help in the future, you can bring this to find me. I'm still quite happy to have you as a friend. After all, we are both outcasts who have to hide among the crowd, aren't we? The young doctor took out an insignia. Though in Ling Yi's eyes, this was just a material. However, was the doctor someone who lacked friends? As for the outcast part mentioned later, Ling Yi eventually took the insignia. I'll take the item, but I am not an outcast. The young doctor didn't seem to care about Ling Yi's answer and retreated with all the Fatui. Ling Yi breathed a sigh of relief, avoiding a fight was perhaps the best outcome. Then, Ling Yi turned around and saw Tainari at the foot of the mountain. What? Tainari couldn't have seen everything that just happened, right? Tainari didn't continue to hide his presence and walked straight up to Ling Yi, his gaze sincere. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Everyone has their own secrets. Besides, I know you rushed back to protect Kali. Thank you for your help, my friend. Ling Yi now felt so awkward that her feet could have carved out a statue of the seven in the ground. How could an experienced ranger like Tainari be held back by the Fatui's petty tricks? He must have returned early. She had really been worrying for nothing. She thought she had a god's eye view, but trying to control the direction of events was still too simplistic. Ling Yi looked at Tainari, feigning ease. It was just a small favor, no need to thank me. My friend. Tainari seemed to notice Ling Yi's social awkwardness and changed the subject. While I appreciate your help, please remember your status as a patient. I don't want to have to pick you up in the forest again. So, go back and drink your medicine now. You didn't take tonight's dose on time, so I might have to add 2 more days to your treatment. Ah. Ling Yi was led back to the small house by Tainari and was forced to receive an extra large portion of medicinal soup. She didn't know if it was intentional, but he didn't even add sugar. The bitterness made Ling Yi's face contort so much her eyes almost disappeared. Tainari didn't mention a word about what happened in the cave. After settling everyone in, he busied himself with many chores, showing no signs of being injured. Ling Yi stood by the window watching him. Everyone here was a living person, not a preset program in a game, so they would perform different actions. The Tainari she saw in the game and what she knew of him was indeed too superficial. But in the end, she was just a passerby, not even knowing her own future. Could she really live each day so indifferently? Ling Yi had no answer. The next day, the sun rose as usual. Ling Yi exercised her rights as a patient and slept in, only getting up leisurely at noon. After all, this was a game world. Living without needing to brush her teeth or wash her face, she really wasn't used to it. Ling Yi looked up and saw that Tainari was rarely inside the camp tent today, writing something at his desk. She unconsciously walked to Tainari's tent and heard his voice coming from inside. Please deliver this letter to General Mahamatra Sino. Next to Tainari was an ordinary NPC Ling Yi didn't recognize, likely a messenger or something similar. Seeing Ling Yi arrive, Tainari greeted her normally. How are you feeling today? Pretty good, pretty good. I'm just a bit restless from being too idle. Tainari rested his chin on his hand and thought for a moment, and then Ling Yi saw an exclamation mark suddenly pop up over Tainari's head. So, tasks can actually be created by oneself? Ling Yi felt like she had found a secret code to wealth. Soon, Tainari made his request. Since you are an adventurer, can I commission you to do something for me? The withering zones in the rainforest are increasing lately. I want you to record their locations and draw a map so the rangers can avoid them. I can actually help clear them, it's just a small favor for me, Ling Yi said, thinking it shouldn't be too hard for her. Please remember your status as a patient. Unsurprisingly, Ling Yi was scolded by Tainari. Ling Yi felt like a kindergarten child being punished, standing straight and giving Tainari an apologetic smile. Tainari also realized he had spoken too harshly and quickly added, the frequency of withering zones appearing is getting higher. Even if they are temporarily cleared, they will grow back. So, you cannot let your guard down. I understand, Ling Yi replied with her head down. Tainari could tell from Ling Yi's look that she wouldn't listen obediently, so he emphasized again, you must promise me that you won't try to clear the withering zones yourself. Otherwise, you'll have to stay here and do cleaning work with Kali. So strict. He really has the authority of a teacher. This was the first time Ling Yi had felt such a sincere admonition. Opening the quest log, there was indeed only the map drawing task, even marked in red letters saying she must not clear the withering zones. Fine. Then she would enjoy being a patient once more. Ling Yi finally gave Tainari a promise and even left a thumbprint before receiving this hard-won task. The reward was a generous 160 primo gems, which made Ling Yi feel a bit embarrassed taking it. Furthermore, the map area was just the circle around Port Ormus. Since she couldn't enter the caves, it was only the surface. Overall, it was simple, easy, and highly rewarding. Ling Yi set out after getting the task. She just had to return before sunset. If she was late, she'd face the punishment of a massive dose of medicinal soup. Ling Yi shook her head just thinking about it. Better to be a good girl. Offending Master Tainari won't end well. However, Ling Yi felt more and more out of place as she walked. In the past, when she picked flowers and grass along the road, she'd always end up pulling out a whopper flower, but so far, there hadn't been a single one. Walking along, she used to see fungus popping up from the water, soil, and leaves in various places, but now she couldn't see a single one. Then there were the Fatui. Before, they would see her from afar and stare her down with their guns, but now they turned and left the moment they saw her, as if she were the source of some plague. What happened overnight? She did clear a large withering zone nearby, but surely that wouldn't make her so unpopular with the local creatures? Don't common monsters respawn every 24 hours? Ling Yi looked around and found no clues, so she could only diligently focus on her task. As it grew late, Ling Yi's speed was indeed astonishingly fast. She had explored the entire vicinity in just one afternoon, partly thanks to not having to fight any monsters. Looking down at the map, Ling Yi's brow began to furrow. The number of withering zones was truly staggering. She wouldn't have known without looking. Almost every path had traces of the withering zone. It was hard to find a complete path for the rangers to patrol safely. If this continued, people from outside wanting to reach Lio would have to take a detour. When Ling Yi handed the map to Tainari, she observed his expression, which was more solemn than ever before. Just then, a commotion came from outside. Tainari, this is bad. Kali fainted. Tainari immediately rushed out of the tent to Kali's room, and Ling Yi followed right behind him. Ling Yi looked at Kali on the bed. Her face was pale, she was breaking out in a cold sweat, and the black lines representing Eliezer had darkened significantly. Tainari checked on Kali's condition, his expression becoming even grimmer, and he quickly turned to go back to his own room. Ling Yi stayed in the room, looking at her hands. A thought surfaced in her mind, perhaps she could try? Since she could handle Dvalin's toxins, perhaps it would also work on Kali. Ling Yi held Kali's hands with both of hers, and gentle hydro-element energy wound its way up her arms. Kali's trembling body seemed to be soothed and finally stabilized a bit, and the black lines gradually faded. It worked. But the smile on Ling Yi's face didn't last long. This weak effect was only superficial, Kali remained unconscious. No miracle happened. Ling Yi guessed that the pollution existed within Irmin's soul, and it was that pollution that caused Eliezer. So as long as Kali still had the knowledge of Irmin's soul in her mind, it wouldn't be easily eliminated. What a hassle. But the traveler is still in Liu, and the next stop is Inajima. It's unknown how long it will be until they reach Sumeru. How much more pain must be endured? Is there really no other way? While Ling Yi was still thinking, Tainari finally walked in with the medicine. After he fed it to Kali, her complexion finally improved a bit. Tainari arranged for others to take care of Kali, then stepped out of the tent and called Ling Yi aside. Kali's condition is very serious and requires a place with better facilities for treatment. I want to commission you to go to the sanctuary of Surasthana with me. Ling Yi naturally couldn't refuse, and she set out with Tainari that night. They finally arrived at the sanctuary of Surasthana as the sky was just beginning to brighten. Ling Yi couldn't help much, so she could only stay by Kali's side, watching Tainari work and discuss different treatment plans with the scholars. Things were gradually sliding toward an uncontrollable state. Until... Did I feel wrong? Is something invisible approaching this place? Kali had been sleeping fitfully before arriving, but now she seemed to be soothed by something, as if she were having a beautiful dream. So, is it Nahida? Chapter 29, The Special One is You. The strange feeling came and went quickly. Although Ling Yi hadn't actually met Nahida in person, he was absolutely certain that it was Nahida's power just now. So this is what it feels like to be watched by a deity? Ling Yi quickly got up, preparing to tell Tainari the news of Kali's improvement. Coming outside, Ling Yi didn't see Tainari anywhere. Where was he? Ling Yi had to stop a passerby to ask about Tainari's whereabouts. Excuse me, have you seen where Tainari went? A person who looked like an academia scholar turned around and said to Ling Yi, Senior Tainari went to the academia, he probably won't be back for a while. Went to the academia? Having no choice, Ling Yi could only return to the house to continue looking after Kali. It wasn't until dusk that Tainari finally rushed back. Tainari looked unusually disheveled, dew had settled on his ears and tail, and he didn't even have time to brush it off before heading straight inside. Thank you for watching over Kali for me. I've really troubled you. Please go rest first, you can stay in the room next door for tonight. Also, remember to take your medicine. Although Tainari was exhausted, he didn't forget to remind Ling Yi before diving into a new round of treatment. Ling Yi couldn't help much, so he obediently went back to take his medicine, not wanting to cause Tainari any trouble. I can't really take the insignia to find the doctor for help, can I? Amidst these stray thoughts, sleep finally came. With a blink of an eye, a pink dreamscape suddenly appeared before Ling Yi. Is this Irmin's soul? Ling Yi's body instinctively moved toward the center of the giant tree. The outline of the tree became clearer, and pink leaves fell upon Ling Yi, yet he could never seem to reach the base of the tree. Whispers from an unknown source drifted into his ears, and soft leaves brushed through his hair. Ling Yi felt as if he were about to fall asleep again. But Ling Yi didn't notice that as he slowly approached the tree, the withered roots of Irmin's soul seemed to be affected by something, they began to flake away and crumble, while a tiny, tender green sprout slowly grew. The next day, Ling Yi woke up as usual, his mind feeling a bit hazy. I think I had a dream? But I can't remember what it was about. Ling Yi thought for a moment. Perhaps because he had come to Teyvat, he hadn't dreamed in a long time. Was it because this was Sumeru? Nahida or Greater Lord Rukhadevata? With no other clues, Ling Yi could only give up thinking for now and went outside. To his surprise, Kali was already able to get up and even looked to be in good spirits. Kali. You're okay. Kali sat on a stone bench nearby, looking a bit embarrassed as he greeted Ling Yi. Yeah, Master Tainari said I've mostly recovered, at least the illness won't flare up for now. I'm sorry, did I cause you all trouble? How could that be? Getting sick isn't your fault. Ling Yi gave Kali a small hug as comfort, and Kali returned the smile. Ling Yi's heart finally settled a bit. Although he knew Kali wouldn't die, who knew if the plot would be changed because of him? Just then, Tainari walked out of the house and went straight to Kali. Kali, you'll need to stay at the sanctuary of Surasthana for a while longer for observation. If you feel any discomfort, tell me immediately. Now go back and get some rest. Kali nodded obediently, while Tainari gave Ling Yi a look. Does he have something to say to me? Ling Yi naturally followed him to a small flower bed at the edge of the sanctuary of Surasthana. But what met him was Tainari's searching gaze. Forgive my bluntness, but I just want to ask, did you do something? I know Eliezer cannot possibly improve this quickly. This question stumped Ling Yi. To say he did nothing wouldn't be quite right, but he hadn't felt like he'd been very effective at the time. Moreover, Kali's improvement wasn't solely his doing, Nahida could be considered the unsung hero. Although Ling Yi knew from the plot that Nahida also had no way to deal with Eliezer, he could indeed soothe the pain. In the end, Ling Yi could only shamelessly nod and take the credit. Even if he didn't know if it was really because of him, what if it actually worked? Perhaps he didn't understand it, but Tainari might. As long as it could alleviate Kali's illness, any attempt was worth it. I did do something, but it didn't seem to have much effect at the time. Seeing Ling Yi admit it, Tainari quickly asked, then, could you demonstrate it for me? Consider it a personal request of mine. Actually, it's just like this. My specialty is that I can purify pollution. Gentle hydro element slowly emerged in Ling Yi's palm. Tighnari watched the sphere of water quietly. It was indeed different from ordinary hydro element, just being near it made one's body feel light and breathing feel smooth. May I take some as a sample? Ling Yi readily agreed. Ling Yi and Tighnari spent the whole day tinkering in the laboratory, finally obtaining an accurate report through instrument testing. There is indeed a significant improvement. The purity is 34.1% higher than the water usually consumed in Sumeru, and 17.9% higher than condensed hydro element. There's also a very peculiar purification function. This leaf, contaminated by a withering zone, actually returned to its original state in the water. Furthermore, this unique hydro element doesn't last long. After leaving the host, its effects begin to diminish every hour. After 24 hours, it becomes identical to the effect of other condensed hydro elements. Even other elemental powers have this effect. Tighnari gave his final conclusion, so, the special one is indeed you. Ling Yi felt a bit embarrassed. Tighnari's gaze was too intense, as if he were looking at a rare treasure of immense research value. However, I'm still very grateful that you could trust me and were willing to let me know your secret. Hearing Tighnari say this made Ling Yi feel even more uneasy. In fact, the traveler hadn't hidden their identity from beginning to end, openly telling others they were from outside the world of Teyvat. So, in reality, it had always been Ling Yi who was unwilling to trust others. No need for thanks. Isn't being able to help the important part? Ling Yi changed the subject. Didn't you say you wanted to research medicine to suppress Eliezer? Perhaps we can move on to the next step. Tighnari nodded, and the two buried themselves in research once more. Just like that, Ling Yi stayed at the sanctuary of Surasthana for a full 10 days. Today was the day Tighnari officially announced that Ling Yi could shed his status as a patient, and it was also the day Ling Yi chose to leave. Holding a bouquet Kali had picked from the sanctuary of Surasthana early that morning in his left hand, and a special forest ranger insignia from Tighnari in his right, Ling Yi stood among the group, facing the Chimera not far away. Cheese. Waving goodbye to everyone, Ling Yi set out on his journey again. No, it was the Sumeru Desert Great Adventure. Fortunately, the rest of the journey went smoothly without any unpleasant incidents. After much hardship, he finally arrived in Fontaine. Taking the Clementine line and experiencing the power of technology, Ling Yi finally found a mechanical repair shop and ordered 10 vending machines, to be picked up a month later. With this, Ling Yi's travel adventure finally concluded. Well then, Liu, I'm back. I just wonder, traveler, if you all have returned from Karst yet? Chapter 30, Please Fight Me. Stepping into Liu Harbor once again, not much had changed since she left. Ling Yi walked past the crafting bench with light steps. Having not done daily commissions for so long, she actually missed them a bit. Is that Songli? Just as Ling Yi was about to say hello, she saw a tall, yellow-haired man slowly walking up from behind Songli. A hydrovision hung at his waist, and the smile on his face was very bright. Ah, it's Child. After freezing for just a second, both of their eyes turned toward Ling Yi at the same time. Ling Yi could only manage an awkward smile while waving at Songli. Sigh, there's no way out of saying hello now. Songli introduced Ling Yi to Tartaglia with a familiar air. It is my young friend Ling Yi, it seems she has just returned from abroad. This is Mr. Tartaglia from Snezhnia. Ling Yi nodded politely to Tartaglia and replied, I didn't expect to run into brother Songli here. Indeed, I've just returned from Fontaine. Tartaglia looked at Ling Yi again with a gentle smile. I didn't know Mr. Songli had friends from Fontaine. My apologies for the lack of manners. Why don't we go to the Liulai Pavilion together? Ling Yi immediately interrupted Tartaglia's invitation. After all, the more she looked at those eyes, the more they seemed calculating. Ever since the incident with Il Daughteri, Ling Yi really didn't dare to interact with any harbinger. They were all too shrewd, she'd better be careful. Hello, Mr. Tartaglia. Unfortunately, I've just returned and was planning to head to the Adventurers Guild, so I won't disturb you. Tartaglia looked regretful, though the smile on his face didn't fade one bit. No matter, there will be other opportunities. After saying goodbye to the two, Ling Yi breathed a sigh of relief. The pressure just now was indeed intense. She feigned composure as she walked toward Catherine, but out of the corner of her eye, she kept a secret watch until they were far away before finally relaxing. Catherine, I'm here to pick up some commissions. Let's start with 20. Catherine's smiling service quickly processed the paperwork for Ling Yi. Because he fully trusted Ling Yi's strength, most of the tasks involved dangerous monster clearing or escorting goods. Ling Yi planned out a route for the commissions and started rushing out. After pulling Yanfei at a critical moment during the last gacha session, Ling Yi's combat power had instantly surged. She could easily handle various monsters without needing other elements. Yanfei, the god of beginners. 3 whopper flowers. A group of slimes. Treasure hoarders. But soon, Ling Yi noticed that someone seemed to be behind her. Fearing she might miss a treasure chest, Ling Yi had the habit of using elemental sight frequently. Although the person behind her was indeed well hidden, the aqua blue element was quickly exposed before her eyes. No way. Tartaglia. In an instant, Ling Yi's heart jumped into her throat. No, surely he hasn't been following me ever since I left Liu Harbor? I should have only used the pyro element just now. For a moment, Ling Yi felt the fear of a young girl being stalked, but soon, a brilliant idea formed in her mind. There was a waterfall near Liu, and one could actually enter through the middle section. If she timed it right, using the waterfall to temporarily hide her figure and then teleporting the moment she got inside, even Tartaglia wouldn't be able to catch up. Having made up her mind, Ling Yi looked down at the map and pretended to run in that direction. The person behind her indeed followed quickly, but to Ling Yi's surprise, Tartaglia didn't seem to want to hide himself at all and stood directly in front of her. Ling Yi was forced to stop and pretend to be unaware. Oh, it's Mr. Tartaglia. Why are you here? Tartaglia's bright and sunny smile almost blinded Ling Yi. If a child fan saw this, they'd probably go crazy. Unfortunately, Ling Yi didn't have a chimera yet. I actually came to the wilderness to look for special glaze lilies. I happened to witness Miss Ling Yi's valiant combat and admire it greatly. I wonder if Miss Ling Yi would be willing to have a duel with me? Of course, I know this request is a bit forward, so I will pay you in mora. How does 1 million mora per match sound? Ling Yi, ah. Asking me to fight? For real? Ling Yi imagined it in her head, Tartaglia unleashing a powerful arrow of still water, his sharp blades striking ruthlessly at Ling Yi, this poor little slime. Then, a string of bubble-like immune text would pop up over Ling Yi's head. In the end, Tartaglia would just be giving Ling Yi a bath with pure hydro element. Pfft. Ling Yi really couldn't help but burst out laughing. No matter how strong you are, elemental immunity will put you in your place. But Ling Yi could only think about it. Even if she did fight Tartaglia, she would have to pretend to be injured, otherwise, her disguise as an elemental creature would definitely be blown. There was no helping it, the flaws were too big. Ling Yi had completely lost confidence in her acting skills. Ling Yi could only refuse with a cold face, no way. I have professional ethics. I just took on 20 commissions and need to finish them today. Let's make it another time. Tartaglia looked at the powerful Fontaine adventurer before him. When he mentioned fighting, she had actually laughed. So, this last sentence must be an excuse. But is fighting me really that funny? As expected, following her secretly was the right move, this woman still has secrets. To come all the way from Fontaine at such a critical juncture and be acquainted with Zhongli, it seems I need to keep a close eye on her. Tartaglia wasn't annoyed at failing to achieve his goal and proposed another plan. Then I apologize for the intrusion. Let's meet another time. Please do come to the Northland Bank, I'll be waiting for you there for the next few days. Ah, well, I'm very busy these next few days. How about we meet in a month? A month? By then, the Liu storyline would be over, and poor Tartaglia would be sent back to his country. What would be the point of fighting then? Seeing the corners of Ling Yi's mouth uncontrollably curling up, Tartaglia didn't refuse. Instead, he flashed a meaningful smile, then it's a promise. You mustn't break it. Ling Yi watched Tartaglia leave again, feeling as though she'd been schemed against. But after thinking carefully, she couldn't find any loss, so she could only make a mental note against Tartaglia. When Zhongli sends the traveler to buy things later, she'll definitely make sure Tartaglia pays through the nose. After Tartaglia left, Ling Yi quickly finished all of today's tasks, returned to Liu Harbor to collect her basic rewards, and then found the inn where she previously stayed to settle in. The window here offered a perfect view of Catherine, so as soon as the traveler returned from Shueun Karst, she would see him. Simply perfect. Now, she just had to wait for Ether to return. Chapter 31, Matters of the Contract. Wow. Traveler, what's nearby? It smells so good. Paimon's foodie genes were stirred. For the past few days, he had been sleeping in the wild in Shueun Karst and being pursued by the Millilith. He truly hadn't slept or eaten well. He didn't expect to smell such a mouth-watering fragrance as soon as he returned to pick up his daily commissions. Ether shook his head helplessly, it seemed the mora he earned from today's commissions wouldn't be saved for long. Ling Yi suddenly appeared behind the two of them, holding 2 cups of fragrant milk tea. That's right, while waiting for the traveler to return, Ling Yi had already whipped up the first batch of milk tea. Although there were no pearls, for the vast Liu, there were plenty of things that could be added. For example, the cup in Ling Yi's left hand had Kingsin added, which had a refreshing function similar to mint. The one on the right was Ling Yi's special bobo, using a hydro element shell to wrap the juice of a sunsetia inside, every sip felt like the juice was blooming in the mouth. Ling Yi couldn't help but praise themselves as a little genius. At this moment, Paimon was very surprised to see Ling Yi suddenly appear, but before he could even ask anything, he was attracted by the milk tea in Ling Yi's hand. What is this? Want a taste? Paimon looked left and right, then lunged for the bobo milk tea on the right. With one sip, his eyes uncontrollably turned into starry eyes, and then he took 2 more big gulps. Ling Yi handed the cup on the left to Ether. Actually, I've been spending the last few days developing new drinks. Want to try? Ether politely took the milk tea from Ling Yi's hand and took a sip. It was indeed extraordinary, even though he wasn't one to prioritize his appetite, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Looking at your expressions, I can tell it's pretty good. If you want to drink it again in the future, you can wait for my shop to open. You're welcome to visit. Paimon sucked down the entire cup in one go and let out a satisfied burp. Hearing Ling Yi's words, he quickly asked, when does it open? I must come. Oh wait, I'll come every day from now on. To this, Ling Yi scratched their head awkwardly, as for that, Liu's procedures are a bit complicated. It might take at least half a month. Actually, Ling Yi's milk tea shop didn't need a large storefront at all, they could even just set up a stall by the roadside. Once the automatic vending machines were out later, they would only need to restock periodically. But the difficulty lay in these procedures. They hadn't paid much attention when doing quests before, but when they actually prepared to submit the forms, they realized how difficult it was to get things done. to the point where Ling Yi had already lost hope of opening the shop in the short term. Ether and Paimon both looked disappointed, but soon Ether proposed a new idea. I don't know if you'd mind, but perhaps you could collaborate with Chef Mao at Wanmin Restaurant to sell them? I met a Liu chef named Xiangling in Mondstadt. I think you two might get along well, and Xiangling is the head chef at Wanmin Restaurant. Ether's words reminded Ling Yi. Wanmin Restaurant came with its own traffic, they wouldn't even need much promotion to gain a large number of customers. As long as every customer tasted the milk tea, they probably wouldn't forget it easily. Soon, their milk tea would become a household name. Even if they placed automatic vending machines later, they could be placed near Wanmin Restaurant. It was indeed killing two birds with one stone. Then I'll have to trouble you, Ether, to introduce me. Ether nodded readily. The three of them walked down the stairs. Xiangling was currently helping out in Wanmin Restaurant. Seeing the traveler return, he greeted them warmly. Have you all come to Liu too? How does it feel? Why don't you stay at Wanmin Restaurant today? I guarantee I'll make you a memorable dinner. Ling Yi followed Ether into Wanmin Restaurant and greeted Xiangling, which quickly caught Xiangling's attention. This friend is. Ether introduced him to Xiangling. This is an adventurer from Fontaine, and also a skilled chef. She wants to come and discuss a business deal with Wanmin Restaurant. Oh? You're a chef too? I wonder what your specialty is? I'm so curious, I don't even know what kind of dishes Fontaine has. If they were serious, Ling Yi could only answer Xiangling that Fontaine was all about desserts, coffee and soda basically, not many normal dishes, at least that's how Ling Yi felt in the game. But now, Ling Yi took out their masterpiece from behind them, milk tea. Fontaine's desserts and drinks are very famous. This is different from Liu. Xiangling curiously looked at the cup of milk tea in front of him and took a slow sip. MHM. Oh. From the initial sweetness upon entering the mouth to the faint fragrance later, and finally the lingering aftertaste of tea leaves, it was indeed a flavor never seen before. In an instant, Xiangling had countless ways to improve this milk tea in his mind. For example, slime milk tea, Jueyun chili milk tea, or even frog milk tea. Truly unique. Is this a chef from Fontaine? I wonder where your shop is, can I visit? Ling Yi could only explain again that they were just an unemployed person living off the Adventurers Guild. Recently, they had grown tired of the days of fighting and killing, so they planned to open a shop based on the cooking skills they had acquired during their adventures. In the end, their application got stuck, and they had no choice but to seek cooperation. Xiangling agreed without even thinking, and was even willing to make room in the shop specifically for Ling Yi to place the milk tea. Everyone was happy. But Ling Yi wasn't that kind of unscrupulous merchant. They signed a contract with Xiangling, willing to give 50% of the profit to Wanmin Restaurant. This is the contract I just drafted. If there are no problems, you can sign it. Of course, this met with Xiangling's absolute opposition. Xiangling flipped to the profit-sharing page and shook his head directly. I'm making this friend with you sincerely. 50%? You're only taking up a small space. You're underestimating me too much. Ling Yi, of course, sincerely wanted to give 50% of the profit. Opening a shop was more out of interest, they didn't intend to make much money. Besides, they had already made a fortune from the ley line sprouts they casually farmed. They had accumulated over 10 million in their bag these days, so they really didn't lack more. Moreover, no matter how you looked at it, using Wanmin Restaurant's venue and popularity was indeed worth this price. But how could Ling Yi win an argument against Xiangling? After some back and forth, the contract was directly cut down to 20% by Xiangling. No way, 20% is really the minimum. Otherwise, I won't open it. Ling Yi put their hands on their hips, indicating they would go on strike. Xiangling could only shake his head angrily beside them. Ether and Paimon stood aside awkwardly, not knowing how to intervene. Even Kuaba popped up from the side to stare at them, only wishing he could speak a few human words. If anyone else saw this, they would think two merchants were disputing over interests. Who would have thought this was a scene of giving up profits? Outside the door, Chef Mao finally finished his work and came to the kitchen. It's not impossible for our young friend to insist on giving us 20% of the profit. At most, I'll just help with the promotion. Chef Mao clearly looked like someone who had weathered many storms. One sentence calmed them both down and finally facilitated this hard-won contract. Alright then, Xiangling finally agreed, but still turned his face away in a huff. Ling Yi looked at Xiangling somewhat apologetically. It's really my first time doing business. How about this, whenever I come up with a new dish in the future, I'll let you be the first to taste it. Xiangling finally opened one eye to look at Ling Yi, then it's a deal. If I find out you've secretly taken a new dish out for others to eat, I'll change it to 10% no matter what. Ling Yi chuckled and took out several recipes from Fontaine and Sumuru from their bag as an apology. The matter finally came to a close. Ling Yi also promised to deliver a sufficient amount of goods tomorrow. Finally, they were fed 3 Liu dishes by Xiangling, which received high praise, before things finally settled. Ether, Paimon and Ling Yi finally filled their stomachs and walked out of Wanmin Restaurant, but the sky was getting dark. Looking at the setting sun, Ling Yi suddenly froze for a moment. Oh no, they had come to wait for the traveler today because they had something to do. How could they have forgotten it completely? And Paimon beside them also suddenly froze for a moment. Today was the day he had an appointment with that child to go to the Liulai Pavilion. He had eaten so much that he wouldn't be able to eat anything later. Ether also looked thoughtful, suddenly remembering that he hadn't done the daily commissions he took today. Just like that, the three of them sighed in unison with a tacit understanding. Tonight was destined to be an eventful night. Chapter 32, The Grand Performance Begins. Ether and Ling Yi spoke at the same time. You go first. Ether felt a bit embarrassed and turned to Ling Yi, bringing up what had happened since he arrived in Liu in his meeting with Tartaglia that day. I'm really sorry, I lost track of time today, and there are still 2 commissions left undone. Please help Paimon with them, they are both delivery tasks. I'll be back soon. Ling Yi was secretly pleased. This was an unexpected surprise. Previously, he had been thinking about how to persuade Ether to take him along, but now. Sure, no problem. I'll keep an eye on Paimon. With that, he pulled little Paimon closer to him. Paimon glared at Ling Yi unhappily. Hey. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't need to be watched. By the way, what were you going to say just now? Ling Yi quickly made up a lie. I was just going to invite you to be the taster for my new product, but this can wait. You should go and finish your commissions first. Being late is not good for your reputation. Ether nodded and hurried towards the harbor. Ling Yi, on the other hand, took Paimon to Northland Bank. It has to be said, the walk felt just like being in a game, especially with Paimon by his side. Indeed, Paimon is the essence of the game. Paimon, unusually quiet, stayed by Ling Yi's side, rubbing his round little belly, occasionally letting out a satisfied burp. It seemed the milk tea was quite filling. Perhaps he should consider selling some fruit tea to aid digestion. Finally, they arrived at the entrance of Northland Bank. Tartaglia noticed the unusual duo immediately. After all, according to his intelligence, Paimon had never been separated from the traveler. Moreover, today was the day to clear the traveler's suspicions, yet the traveler was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Ling Yi, a seemingly unrelated adventurer from Fontaine, was with Paimon. Although there was intelligence mentioning a powerful Fontaine adventurer who had appeared in Mondstadt, his whereabouts were uncertain. He seemed to have had brief contact with the traveler, and the Fatui could only confirm that he had appeared before the storm terror incident and then vanished. In any case, this Ling Yi was not simple. Tartaglia greeted them with full attention. Oh, what a coincidence. But why is Ling Yi here instead of the traveler? Did something happen? Ling Yi explained calmly, Ether had something urgent to take care of, so he asked me to come and let you know. I hope this isn't too presumptuous. Tartaglia waved his hand, not at all, but... Tartaglia seemed to recall something but quickly made a decision. It's fine, we can go first. I'll have my subordinates bring the traveler to Liulai Pavilion. Let's go. However, the mysterious person we are about to meet might not be so mysterious to you, Ling Yi. Ling Yi knew they were going to meet Zhongli but maintained politeness. Oh? If it's not mysterious, then it must be someone I know. But I don't know many people in Liu. Could it be Zhongli? Haha, it seems Ling Yi is quite perceptive. Paimon listened to their conversation, determined to be the traveler's eyes and ears. The familiarity between Tartaglia and Ling Yi was suspicious, and Paimon hadn't forgotten the previous harbinger's actions. He couldn't fully trust child. But Ling Yi, he trusted completely. He hoped he wasn't being deceived. With the traveler absent, Paimon had to stay alert. So, Paimon inserted himself between the two, playing the role of a curious and innocent bystander. Zhongli? Who's that? Tartaglia didn't explain further, suggesting they meet first before introductions. Soon, the three arrived at Liulai Pavilion. The night view of Liulai Pavilion, adorned with beautiful lanterns, was breathtaking. The luxurious experience was something unavailable in Mondstadt. Paimon was instantly captivated. Though his belly was still full, the aroma at the entrance made him realize he could eat more. Please. Tartaglia displayed the mannerisms of a gracious host, clearly well versed in etiquette. Ling Yi also nodded slightly, showing the grace of a Liu native. The three entered Liulai Pavilion with different thoughts, ascending the stairs towards a private room. Pulling back the curtain, Zhongli was slowly sipping tea. Seeing Ling Yi emerge from behind the curtain, he paused. Ahem, Zhongli, look who's here. Ah, it's Ling Yi. But why are you here? I heard from Tartaglia that a traveler was coming. Ether was delayed by some matters. He asked me to come first to avoid keeping you waiting. He should be here soon, within a quarter of an hour. I see. Please, have a seat. Zhongli sat in the main seat, while Ling Yi chose the seat opposite him, leaving the seat next to Zhongli for Ether. Tartaglia sat to the right of Ling Yi. Seeing that Ether hadn't arrived yet, Tartaglia turned to Ling Yi and asked, How did you meet Zhongli? I had to pull many strings to invite him. Ling Yi glanced at Zhongli and fabricated a story, it was for business. I intended to purchase the most luxurious funeral service from Wangshang Funeral Parlor, and Zhongli introduced it to me. We became acquainted through this. Oh? Zhongli is indeed a consultant for Wangshang Funeral Parlor, but isn't Hu Tao in charge of the business aspects? Ling Yi seemed to reminisce, speaking calmly, I didn't expect Zhongli to personally promote the service, so I signed a contract with him immediately. It was a great deal. Tartaglia, you might consider it too. Though you might not need it, your subordinates in the Fatui might find it useful. After all, it includes body collection, burial, and a complimentary durable tombstone. Ling Yi enthusiastically discussed Wangshang Funeral Parlor's services as if he were a part of it, leaving Tartaglia speechless. Paimon, eyeing the delicious food, was about to enjoy the meal but was soon drawn into their conversation. Why is Ling Yi discussing Wangsheng funeral parlor's business with this fat Chui harbinger? Finally, the sound of the door opening interrupted their conversation. Ether poked his head in, looking at the awkward gathering. Tartaglia unconsciously sighed in relief. Ling Yi was indeed a loyal customer of Wangsheng funeral parlor, he had almost been convinced to place an order himself. Thus, the grand performance finally began. Chapter 33, A Major Revelation. Paimon saw Ether enter and finally broke free from the uncomfortable atmosphere, quickly making his way to Ether's side. Ether naturally greeted everyone, saying, "I'm really sorry, something held me up." Tartaglia also stood up and began introducing Mr. Zhongli, who was seated at the head of the table, to the traveler. "This is Mr. Zhongli, a consultant for Wangsheng funeral parlor." Ether nodded politely. Although this Mr. Zhongli appeared rather young, he was exceptionally composed, with an elegance in every movement that was clearly not possessed by ordinary people. The only question was, what kind of organization was Wangsheng funeral parlor? Before Ether could ask, Ling Yi interjected. "Ether, you might not know, but Wangsheng funeral parlor is a renowned organization in Liu, specializing in funeral and burial services. Even the funeral rites of the former Liu adepti were handled by Wangsheng funeral parlor. If you're interested, you could also ask the consultant to arrange one for you. Oh, and this time, the funeral for Rex Lapis should also be handled by Wangsheng funeral parlor according to tradition. This is an opportunity to get close to Rex Lapis's ascended body, and it's also the reason why Tartaglia invited Mr. Zhongli to meet you." Tartaglia looked at Ling Yi with a complex expression, feeling as if all his lines had been stolen. This couldn't be a setup, could it? Zhongli nodded along with Ling Yi's words and said with some annoyance, "The ceremony for welcoming the adepti is so grand, but is there no one to oversee the ceremony for sending them off?" Tartaglia was about to speak up, but he saw a figure float past him. Ling Yi came directly between Ether and Zhongli. "But you also know that the ceremony for welcoming the adepti took 7 stars a lot of time to arrange. 7 stars is the richest organization in Liu, so they don't care about such small matters, but they have no intention of sponsoring the ceremony for sending the adepti off. So." Ling Yi looked at Tartaglia, signaling him to continue. "I will cover this expense. This is also a requirement for my collaboration with Mr. Zhongli." Ether understood the situation. To see Rex Lapis's ascended body, they needed to hold the ceremony for sending the adepti off. In this, the Fat Chui would provide the funds, Wangsheng funeral parlor would handle the arrangements, and he indeed needed to do something, otherwise, he might be seen as a freeloader. "I see. Whatever Mr. Zhongli needs, I will cooperate. Thank you, my friend. Please meet me outside later for a discussion." After discussing the important matters, Ether and Paimon also enjoyed some of the Liulai Pavilion's fine cuisine. Ling Yi, however, was not interested in this. She merely stared at Tartaglia with a distant gaze. Tartaglia pondered, feeling that he hadn't offended this woman, had he? But during the recent drinking session, he had been interrupted several times, and later he had been relegated to the role of a mere financier. Had something been discovered? Or could it be that this mysterious adventurer from Fontaine was actually a deeply hidden adeptus from Liu? Tartaglia grew more suspicious. After all, few people from Fontaine were so well versed in Liu's customs and rituals, especially the small details, which couldn't be learned through simple study. Tartaglia quickly returned Ling Yi's gaze with an innocent yet probing look. "Miss Ling Yi, is there something you want to say to me?" Ling Yi's lips curled up slightly, but she shook her head. "Nothing, nothing. I just think Mr. Tartaglia is quite handsome and powerful. You must have many admirers." Tartaglia, hey. Paimon. Ether. This remark shifted everyone's attention from the food to the two of them. Tartaglia couldn't figure it out. The woman in front of him seemed to have such a jumpy thought process that it was impossible to keep up, let alone predict what shocking thing she might say next. This, it seems to have nothing to do with Miss Ling Yi. Could it be that Miss Ling Yi is planning to pursue me? Ling Yi's gaze was intense as she changed the subject. No, I'm asking for a friend. This was indeed the truth. Ling Yi had a friend in the game who was very interested in all aspects of Paimon's life, but unfortunately, there was too little information available. Ling Yi had a sudden inspiration. What if she could really go back one day? Could she also do her friend a favor and get some exclusive news? At this moment, Ling Yi was thinking like a news reporter. Unfortunately, in everyone else's eyes, this was no different from a subtle confession. Paimon even stopped eating, focusing intently on Tartaglia's response. Tartaglia had never seen such a direct approach before. After all, with his former status as a harbinger, no one dared to speak to him like this. However, after thinking for 2 seconds, Tartaglia still gave a reply, "In that case, I am currently single. Although I'm not considering it at the moment, if it's Miss Ling Yi, maybe I could gather some intel." Tartaglia's harbinger mindset kicked in within a second. But in everyone else's eyes, the meaning of that sentence was clearly, "You can pursue me." Ether and Paimon instantly felt like they had just bitten into a big, juicy melon. Authentic. Ling Yi wanted to ask more, but Tartaglia stood up first. "Excuse me, I have some business to attend to at Northland Bank. Please continue." Tartaglia quickly left the table. Ling Yi's main goal this time was actually to sideline Tartaglia. Naturally, she was on the traveler's side. Just like in the game, Tartaglia had so easily obtained information about the Golden House, which Ling Yi found unacceptable. With her intelligence, how could she be so easily used by Tartaglia? The game's plot couldn't be changed, but now that she was in the game, couldn't she change it? So, Ling Yi planned to make things a bit more difficult for Tartaglia. This was also the main reason Ling Yi came to the drinking session. Only by sidelining Tartaglia and reducing him to the role of a mere financier could she prevent him from taking advantage of the situation. She still needed to ensure that the traveler remained vigilant against Tartaglia. So, after the traveler finished talking with Zhongli, she had to say a few bad words about Tartaglia to the traveler. Now that the main character had left, Ling Yi had no reason to stay. Well, I'm off too. Ether, don't forget to come try my new products tomorrow. I'll be at the Liu Inn. Bidding the three farewell, Ling Yi left the private room, only to find Tartaglia not far away, instructing his Fatui subordinates in a corner. Ling Yi didn't need to listen to know what they were saying. It was surely about keeping a close eye on the traveler's movements and finding the possible location of the ancestral remains. Too bad, Ling Yi couldn't help but smile, already planning her next move in her mind. This mission was not going to be so simple. Chapter 34, A Master of Smearing in the Dark. Tartaglia finally finished his business, turned, and walked along the corridor connected to Liulai Pavilion. Ling Yi flipped over and quietly landed on the roof, walking right over Tartaglia's head. I want to see what this guy is up to. To know your enemy is to be invincible, I must keep track of his movements. Besides, Ling Yi didn't need to look down to see where Tartaglia was. After all, games have a third-person perspective. Is it too much to use a camera bug? Opening the camera system and aiming it to the side, Tartaglia's figure appeared on the screen. Tartaglia didn't seem to realize he was being followed. He walked at his usual pace and reached the corner of the stairs. He went downstairs. Ling Yi quickly lay flat to observe the direction Tartaglia was heading. Is that Yujing Terrace? But the rite of dissension site had mostly been cleared out by the Kixing. There were no other clues left, so what was Tartaglia doing there now? Because Yujing Terrace was too open, Ling Yi couldn't get too close without being spotted, so she could only watch from a high point on the roof. But in the blink of an eye, Tartaglia's figure vanished. Ling Yi had already anticipated this and sighed inwardly. A model youth like her really wasn't suited for sneaky business. This stalking attempt was likely too obvious and got exposed. However, it also proved one thing. Tartaglia really did have something to do, which was why he shook her off. Ling Yi's eyes flickered as she deployed her wind glider and flew toward the entrance of the Northland Bank. Ignoring the gaze of the Fatui intelligence agent at the door, Ling Yi strode into the Northland Bank and headed straight for the second floor. Wow! The secret stash really is here. Ling Yi grabbed it, quickly returned to the first floor, and approached the lady at the counter. Does the Northland Bank provide deposit services? Although Ling Yi looked very strange, Ekaterina remained calm and composed. Of course. Then help me open an account and deposit 200,000. Open it under Tartaglia's name. Oh, right, use his real name, Ajax. Thank you. Ekaterina didn't know if she should open the account. While the young lady's request was normal and banking was their job, opening an account for Lord Child. That seemed inappropriate. But there seemed to be no reason to refuse. This was opening an account and giving money to Lord Child. Ling Yi saw the receptionist's hesitation and added, Don't worry, I'm an acquaintance of your Lord Child. This is the money I'm paying him back. Ekaterina looked suspiciously at the damselette before her. She had never heard of Lord Child having such a fontaine friend, let alone a female one. Helpless, as Ling Yi's gaze was too clear, Ekaterina couldn't find any issues and had to open another account for Lord Child as Ling Yi requested. Ling Yi was satisfied and said to the receptionist, Then I'll have to trouble this Fatui lady to give this letter and the card to Mr. Tartaglia. Without waiting for a reply, Ling Yi strode out of the Northland Bank with a triumphant smile on her face. Mr. Tartaglia, I've deposited some subsistence allowance for you. Of course, those weren't Ling Yi's actual words. But it should have a different kind of effect. When Tartaglia finally returned to the Northland Bank, he received a report from his Fatui subordinates before even entering the door. You're saying Ling Yi was here 10 minutes ago? And she deposited 200,000 in my name. Tartaglia had taken a long detour specifically to shake off the person following him, only to find that Ling Yi had anticipated it and come to the Northland Bank instead. And this letter? The white envelope was very ordinary, without any markings. The letter inside was even simpler. On it, a strange duck was drawn with odd brush strokes. It had a yellow beak, a pure white body, a mask on its head, and a red silk scarf tied around its arm. It was obviously him. But that wasn't the point, what mattered was the duck's posture. The duck was strutting forward proudly with its head held high, but there was a large black hole right in front of it. On the back of the stationery was a sentence handwritten by Ling Yi. Find all 4 drawings for a surprise. What does this mean? Does it mean I'll fall into your trap? But Tartaglia felt it couldn't be that simple, and Ling Yi had mentioned there were 4 drawings in total. Perhaps he could play a little game with Miss Ling Yi during this time. Putting the letter away, Tartaglia turned and headed out again. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ether, Paimon, and Zhongli were chatting about Liu at the entrance of Liulai Pavilion, discussing the items for the rite of parting. After leaving the Northland Bank, Ling Yi returned to the street and happened to run into Ether and Zhongli. You haven't left yet. Paimon counted on his fingers. It had been over an hour since Ling Yi left, she couldn't have been waiting here for them the whole time, right? Ling Yi avoided the question, a faint, eerie smile on her face as she spoke calmly, I had some business to take care of. But since I've run into you, I should warn you all, this Tartaglia is no good. He's likely after Rex Lapis's ancestral remains. So, keep your lips sealed, we can't let those Fatui with their ulterior motives disrupt the rite of parting. Paimon nodded very seriously for once, but then he thought about it, something wasn't right. Didn't Miss Ling Yi just confess her love an hour ago? So saying this now, could it be? Paimon didn't even dare to think about it. It couldn't be revenge for being rejected, right? Big meanie, I'm just a little curious, how do you know Mr. Tartaglia? Back at the dinner, you seemed quite familiar with that harbinger. White fly, curiosity killed the cat. Knowing too much isn't good for you. Ling Yi intentionally left them hanging, which only made Paimon more curious. If there wasn't something going on, why hide it so tightly? How annoying. She really is a big meanie. Ether quickly tried to smooth things over. Ling Yi, didn't you say you wanted me to try your new products? How about we go now? We were planning to stay at the inn tonight anyway. Ling Yi's eyes lit up at that. Staying at an inn was great. She would have plenty of time to give Ether a proper introduction to Tartaglia. So she happily pulled Ether toward the inn, her mouth never stopping as they walked. Let me tell you, not a single one of the Fatui harbingers is a good person. Even though Tartaglia, the 11th seat, is the weakest among them, you absolutely cannot let your guard down. Who knows how many innocent boys and girls have been deceived by that face of his. Blah blah blah. The more Ether listened, the more he felt Miss Ling Yi might have really been traumatized. Could it be, as Paimon said, that this harbinger named Tartaglia actually abandoned Miss Ling Yi? The two talked as they walked, eventually arriving at the entrance of the inn. Ling Yi was getting so excited that she didn't even notice Mr. Tartaglia standing at the inn's entrance. As Ether and Ling Yi entered the inn, Tartaglia heard this. That child fellow, so young and yet so crooked. He's a total psycho. Tartaglia. Chapter 35 The Confession. The surrounding noise inexplicably fell silent. Ether and Paimon both gave Ling Yi a meaningful look. Without turning around, Ling Yi knew who was behind him. After a 3-second pause, he thought, run. Whatever you do, don't look back. Ling Yi looked at Ether with determination, then without a word, turned and jumped from the upper floor. Unfortunately, Tartaglia seemed to be faster. I swear, at that moment, the blade was only a centimeter away from my head. Ling Yi's mind raced through various outcomes. In the end, there seemed to be only one solution. With no other option, Ling Yi ignored the sharp blade and instead moved closer to Tartaglia. He grabbed Tartaglia's arm and pulled him into a nearby alley. Tartaglia. Paimon and Ether. In the dimly lit alley. Ling Yi stared at Tartaglia, puffed up like a pufferfish. Tartaglia sheathed his weapon, looking somewhat puzzled. Shouldn't he be the one who was angry? Aren't you going to explain yourself? Tartaglia asked, seeming to wait for an explanation. Ling Yi reorganized his thoughts. Well, I don't think I said anything wrong. He was determined not to admit any fault. Oh. Then I don't know how I offended Ling Yi, or rather, what made you think I was some kind of creep? You tell me. Sending people, even personally stalking a lovely young lady. Is there something wrong with warning my friends to be more cautious? Although Ling Yi admitted he had been too careless, his words were flawless. Tartaglia laughed, I think you might have misunderstood. Just like how children learn to eat vegetables they dislike, I don't enjoy these tactics either. They're just shortcuts to achieve my goals. I think Ling Yi should understand, after all, you seem to be doing the same thing. Tartaglia's tone suddenly shifted, his expression becoming serious. Previously, I was curious about your identity, so I followed you myself. Although I didn't find anything, I now have some clues. Ling Yi failed to deceive Tartaglia and was stunned by his directness. This world was full of clever people, what shocking answer would they give? You are a follower of the god of Geo. Tartaglia's calm and determined voice resonated with Ling Yi. Now it was Ling Yi's turn to be puzzled. Could it really be as he thought? Tartaglia continued, as soon as something happened to the god of Geo, you appeared. Although you hid well, I discovered you are an elemental creature, so my previous attack had no effect. At the banquet, you tried your best to prevent me from contacting Zhongli and made the traveler distrust me. Although you were clever, I still noticed. Ling Yi followed Tartaglia's reasoning and found it quite logical. He was almost convinced. So, a second later, Ling Yi spoke boldly. Ah, yes, that's right. It's me. You Fatui covet the Gnosis, and as a follower of the god of Geo, I naturally won't let you succeed. You might as well give up. I'll remind you, I'm immune to water, you can't beat me. Tartaglia hadn't expected Ling Yi to admit it so readily. Truthfully, his previous statements were mostly guesswork, but he hadn't expected to hit the mark so accurately. Still, Tartaglia couldn't fully trust him. This whole situation seemed strange, just like the drawing Ling Yi had left him. Could there really be a huge trap right in front of him? Tartaglia spoke again, probing further. Oh. The god of Geo is dead, what uses the Gnosis? Or are you planning to become the new Geo Archon? Or perhaps you know where the Gnosis is? Ling Yi avoided answering, only giving Tartaglia a meaningful smile. I do know, but unfortunately, it's in a place you'll never be able to reach. You might as well give up. Ah, that's right. It's with the god of Geo, the chance of it being stolen is %. Tartaglia seemed to be filled with a new determination. A place I can never reach. You underestimate me, Ling Yi. How about a wager? If you don't interfere, let's see if I can find the gnosis. Ling Yi had never seen such an easy bet. But if he agreed, any further interference would violate the terms. However, if the stakes were high enough, he might still come out ahead. Fine, but if you lose, Tartaglia, you must dress as a maid and sell milk tea in my shop for 3 days. Then he would buy a camera in advance, print out the photos, and paste them on Tartaglia's pillar of shame. Tartaglia, who had expected demands for money or power, was shocked once again. Truly, this person's thoughts were extraordinary. Could this really be a follower of the Geo Archon? But for the glory of Her Majesty, Tartaglia could not refuse. Besides, he might not lose, right? Then it's a deal. Chapter 36, A Temporary Conclusion. Watching Tartaglia leave, Ling Yi also walked up the stairs as if nothing had happened. Still in a good mood, they greeted Ether before turning and returning inside. The door was slowly opened and then gently closed by Ling Yi, completely cutting off all prying eyes from the outside world. After all, this was no ordinary place, it was a bustling Liu and teeming with people. With such a commotion just now, even those inside their rooms couldn't help but peek out curiously. Not to mention, the two protagonists of the story were none other than the mysterious and handsome Fatui Harbinger from Snezhnia and a lavishly dressed young lady from a wealthy family. It was practically the standard setup for main characters in a novel. Don't doubt it, novels of this genre are actually quite popular. And from the looks of it earlier, it seemed like the man had offended the woman and was waiting at her door to apologize. Although no one saw what happened after the two entered the alley, that didn't stop everyone's imaginations from running wild. Thus, the only ones left on the scene were the pitiful Ether and Paimon, staring at each other in confusion. Should we go? Paimon shrugged, unsure what to do for the first time. Ether was also at a loss and could only nod before turning back to his room. However, Ling Yi had already teleported away using the map. What a thrilling scratch that what a chaotic plan this whole night turned out to be. Ling Yi glanced at the original plan notebook in their hand, which clearly stated. Liu Rescue Plan. Step 1. Reduce Tartaglia's contact with the traveler and Paimon, and instill a sense of secrecy in Paimon. Step 2. Create trouble for Tartaglia to keep him too busy to personally monitor things. Step 3. Arrive early at the talisman-making factory and pull off a heist. Each step was followed by densely written notes and precautions, but unfortunately, they seemed useless now. It had pretty much died at step 1. As for step 2. Ling Yi looked at the 3 unsent drawings in their hand. The second drawing showed Tartaglia easily bypassing an obvious trap, discovering a treasure chest ahead, but a dark hand appearing behind him. The third drawing was simple too, Tartaglia digging for treasure and coming up empty-handed. The final drawing revealed the truth, Tartaglia was surrounded by a circle of invisible, giant animals observing him through a glass dome. When Ling Yi first finished drawing these, they thought their artistic skills were pretty good. The images were clear and straightforward, and Tartaglia would surely understand them. What a shame. But then Ling Yi reconsidered, even if they couldn't use these as decoys to confuse Tartaglia anymore, they could still reveal the truth after everything was over, right? After confirming 10 times that no one was following, Ling Yi stealthily made their way near the Golden House. The place was heavily guarded, as expected. Although used to modern skyscrapers, seeing so many buildings made of gold still made them gasp in awe. So this is what it feels like when even the buildings exude luxury. Ling Yi shrank and transformed into a juvenile slime, rolling and gurgling along the wall as they moved inward. Suddenly, they heard a familiar voice. It was Ning Guang. Ling Yi quickly changed direction, ducking into a nearby bush and looking up. But from Ling Yi's current height, they could only see Ning Guang's hair ornament and half of one of her horns. It turned out Ning Guang was chatting with Ganyu. How have things been with the Fatui recently? They've been very active lately. Aside from their previous dealings with the Wangshang funeral parlor, we also discovered a Fatui factory with unusual fund flows. We've already sent people to investigate. Ning Guang quickly made a decision. Let's leak some information through the mole we planted in their ranks. Ganyu hesitated, unsure whether to report it. But, there's one more thing. Speak freely. It's actually a rumor. I heard that the Harbinger called Child has fallen for an adventurer from Fontaine. Besides scheming for the Gnosis, he spends his days following her around. After listening, Ning Guang pondered. Whether it's true or not, it's worth noting. Whether it's that traveler or this misadventurer from Fontaine, invite them both to the Jade Chamber. Perhaps we can seize this opportunity. Ganyu noted it all down. The two discussed some security matters before leaving the Golden House. Ling Yi took advantage of the guard shift change, rolling and gurgling down and using Mora to conceal their form, perfectly infiltrating the area. They wriggled toward the location of the ancestral remains at the very front. Peering through the gaps in the shimmering piles of Mora, Ling Yi saw a real Chinese dragon from another world for the first time. It was truly magnificent. Those dragon horns looked so tempting to touch. And this tail must be nothing like Dvalin's stiff one. Ling Yi's eyes turned into stars. No one in Liu doesn't adore Rex Lapis, they're just putting on a tough front. Glancing left and right, and seeing no one around, Ling Yi darted behind the ancestral remains and quietly hid the bundled up drawings there, taking the chance to give it a quick touch. The cool scales were dense yet soft, with a delicate texture like fine golden chain mail. Ling Yi quickly shook off the wild thoughts in their mind. This was Rex Lapis's body. Such irreverent thoughts were unacceptable. But leaning against it, it felt warm in winter and cool in summer, almost too good to leave. The scales in Ling Yi's mind tipped to the other side once again. How could they not open the photo system to capture a memento? After finishing the task, Ling Yi reluctantly teleported away, this time heading to Mount Aakang. Since it seems I have no role to play even when the final fight breaks out, I might as well go research milk tea. I'm still missing some materials, and they've RESP might as well grind a little more. It has to be said, farming for materials is addictive. The old Ling Yi was a woman with 9,999 of every material in her backpack, they've actually toned it down quite a bit now. But Kingson and Violet Grass are truly a pain to gather. After last time, Ling Yi has lowered their standards a lot. They just hope not to fall and be seen, ruining their reputation. Chapter 37, A Ghostly Encounter at Mount Aakang. Bang! A crisp sound echoed through the towering mountains, and the yellow ember, shattered into several pieces, lay quietly on the ground. Why is there a pig inside? Ling Yi quick-wittedly followed up with a strike, and 2 pieces of raw meat were stuffed back into the bag. Looking up, a solitary violet grass grew at a higher spot. Ling Yi calculated the stamina, a normal climb probably wouldn't reach it, so it would likely require gliding down from another peak again. I remember there should be 2 kings on top of this peak, Ling Yi muttered to herself. Suddenly, Ling Yi's ears twitched. Was that someone shouting nearby? But the distance was too far, and Ling Yi couldn't hear what was being said. She could only take a few more steps toward the source of the sound, and gradually, a short figure appeared on the steep mountainside. That place was extremely dangerous. Ling Yi climbed over a small hill and finally saw the figure clearly. It was Kikai, dressed in blue, currently climbing up the most dangerous section. Further up was a violet grass. And the one shouting from below, dressed in green, was Yayao. Kikai, be careful. Yayao, carrying a small medicine basket, looked very anxious. She also wanted to climb up and had already reached the halfway point, but with no suitable foothold, she was stuck in place. Kikai, out of stamina, can't get down. Orders, not finished. Kikai's situation seemed even worse. Kikai usually relied on giving herself orders to act, but now the order to gather herbs hadn't been completed. If she went any higher, she would very likely slip and fall first due to insufficient stamina. At this height, even if Kikai was a zombie, she could very well fall to her death. The situation was critical. Ling Yi was still quite a distance away from the two, at least, running there normally wouldn't be in time. However, Ling Yi quickly thought of a way. Gliding down from a higher waypoints might still make it in time. Her figure vanished from the spot, and the next second, Ling Yi arrived above the two. Kikai. Don't move. Ling Yi stood at the top, sliding slowly along the cliff wall, and finally moved quickly above the cliff. With a quick grab, the culprit violet grass was taken into Ling Yi's bag. Without a target, Kikai immediately returned to normal and could smoothly control herself to drop to a safe place first. Ling Yi also deployed her wind glider toward Kikai and landed beside her. Here, your violet grass. Next time before you give yourself an order, you have to estimate the height and stamina first. Kikai took the violet grass from Ling Yi's hand somewhat blankly, not knowing how to express her gratitude. She could only stare at Ling Yi with grateful eyes. Thank you. I am. Kikai. Kikai is gathering herbs. Kikai will, pay attention next time. Yayao ran over from a distance. Yuegui was hopping inside Yayao's medicine basket and also poked its head out, shouting toward them, Kikai, are you okay? Also, thank you, big sister. The 2 little cuties instantly melted Ling Yi's heart. If she were to raise these 2 cuties as daughters, Ling Yi felt she would eventually die from excessive blood loss. It's okay, it's okay. My name is Ling Yi, I'm an adventurer. Why didn't you come with other adults to gather herbs? It's still very dangerous for just the 2 of you to come out. Yayao looked a bit self-reproachful, it was I who said I would accompany Kikai out to gather herbs. Hearing this, Kikai got a bit anxious and directly grabbed Ling Yi's sleeve, swaying it gently. It was me. It was the order I gave myself. Don't blame Yayao. Yayao also leaned in, wanting to take out Yuegui to show Kikai, to see if she was injured. Ling Yi wouldn't dream of blaming these 2 little cuties. For such an accident to happen, shouldn't it be the adult's responsibility? Wouldn't you say so, Beizu? Poor supervision. Far away at Bubia Pharmacy practicing medicine, Beizu suddenly sneezed. He took his own pulse in confusion but found nothing. Ling Yi quickly comforted the 2, it's okay, it's not your fault. Let's go down first, it's dangerous here. If there's anything that needs gathering, I can help. Kikai shook her head, looking a bit at a loss, cannot, trouble, others. Yayao also nodded to Ling Yi, explaining for the tongue-tied Kikai, thank you for your help, but gathering herbs is mine and Kikai's job. We can't trouble others. Ling Yi also understood. Kikai was a pharmacy assistant at Bubia Pharmacy, and gathering herbs was certainly part of her daily work. It was just that she was feeling a bit overprotective of these daughters. Then you must be careful. I'll be around here for the next 2 days. If you encounter anything you can't solve, you can shout my name loudly, and I'll come to save you immediately. Both Kikai and Yayao nodded. Thank you, big sister. You should be careful too, big sister. It's best not to stay overnight here. At night there are strange shadows wandering around here. As she reached the latter half, Yayao's tone suddenly became strange, and her voice inevitably carried some fear. This immediately caught Ling Yi's attention. Is there some hidden plot here at Mount Aakang? Ling Yi thought back but didn't find any creature that could be called a dark shadow, or any object that could be misunderstood as such. So, Could it be a new plot? What kind of dark shadow? Did Yayo see it? I saw it. Just 2 evenings ago, on the path up the mountain nearby, an extremely fast creature ran past me. It looked like a giant bird and gave me a very bad feeling. Although it didn't attack me, you should be careful too, big sister. A bird-shaped creature? It couldn't possibly be that woman, could it? Ling Yi was still more inclined towards something like a bloody beast. But if it really was one, then she had to pay more attention. What if it attacked the two while they were gathering herbs? These two are healers with no combat power. Having received the news, Ling Yi was even more determined to investigate thoroughly and clear the obstacles for her daughters. Thank you for the information. I'll be careful. You two must also be careful, careful, and careful again. After giving a few more uneasy instructions and taking the two to a safe place, Ling Yi began a carpet search. Every piece of amber had to be smashed open to check. If a bloody beast was trapped inside, she'd give it a beating. Every patch of grass had to be pushed aside to look. Just in case some mutated slime was hiding inside. She didn't let the Hilichurl camps off either. It was very likely this thing could hide itself, so she peeked into every tent. There were many caves here too. Every corner of the mine shafts had to be checked, and Ling Yi didn't even let the area under the rubble go. Even the entrance to the Adeptus abode was not missed. Who knew if these Adepti, after leaving their abodes, would fail to notice potential dangers right under their noses? In this way, Ling Yi flipped stones hill by hill, and soon went from daytime to late at night. Forget bloody beasts, Ling Yi didn't even find a single strand of ordinary dog hair. Activating elemental sight, Ling Yi simply lay on the cliff and scanned downward. Any unusual movement would be repeatedly studied as a dark shadow suspect. Finally, heaven does not betray those who persevere, Ling Yi actually discovered a strange shadow. And it was indeed as Yayo had described, in the shape of a bird. It wasn't the bloody beast Ling Yi had guessed, but looked more like a person in a strange hood acting suspiciously. But in the blink of an eye, Ling Yi lost track of that dark shadow, as if it were truly a wandering ghost of the mortal realm, appearing and disappearing suddenly. Just then, the whistling wind blew through the mountains, sounding in Ling Yi's ears like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. Ling Yi, my back feels a bit cold. Chapter 38, Finding Home. No matter how much Ling Yi searched, it couldn't find even the slightest trace of the shadow. Not giving up, Ling Yi flew from the mountain to the spot where the shadow had appeared, activating elemental sight and scanning the area. There were only some ordinary flowers and grass, a few lonely oars, and a treasure-hunting mouse in the bushes. Ling Yi felt as if it was being watched by something sinister. The visibility on Mount Ayakang at night was poor. Ling Yi nearly tripped over a stone on the road. If there was truly something dangerous lurking in the darkness, Ling Yi wasn't confident it could avoid being caught off guard. Closing elemental sight, Ling Yi shut its eyes and listened carefully to the faint sounds in the air. Ling Yi had already noticed that this body was different from before. Whether it was flexibility or intuition, it had been thoroughly transformed, becoming less and less human. Perhaps it was truly gaining some power unknowingly. Ah, it heard something. Although it was faint, Ling Yi definitely sensed something moving lightly through the grass. Whoosh! Ling Yi threw the claymore from its back directly into the bushes, precisely striking the center. The fragile bushes instantly melted away, revealing an out-of-place cloth behind them. Yes, it was just an ordinary piece of black velvet. Did it escape? Ling Yi walked over and picked up the tattered cloth. The black fabric was about a meter long and wide, with a hole in the middle where the claymore had pierced it, but otherwise unremarkable. The material was a common style in Liu, very ordinary and cheap. Even if Ling Yi investigated, it wouldn't be surprising if it belonged to someone who had accidentally dropped it. In summary, there was no useful information. But it wasn't entirely without clues. Just the speed at which it had dodged Ling Yi's attack was worth considering. Ling Yi ruled out anyone who had entered the game's pool. After all, there was no reason for someone to be on Mount Ayakang at night, covered in a tattered cloth. Instead, what kind of creature would need to cover itself with a tattered cloth and scare people on the mountain path at night? Ling Yi thought of a creature, a spirit. Spirits couldn't be seen by ordinary people, so using a tattered cloth to make some noise was a good method. Plus, spirits were extremely fast and could dodge Ling Yi's attack. But what was the purpose of this spirit running around the mountain? With a general direction, Ling Yi began to search again. After a few steps, it finally saw the main character of this Mount Ayakang ghost story. A little fatty hiding behind a large rock, shivering. Up close, it seemed like you could hear the sound of teeth chattering from fear, apparently scared by Ling Yi's recent attack. Even after dying once, was he still so timid? Ling Yi reached out and gently patted little fatty on the back. Ah! A piercing scream rang out. Ah, my ears! Ling Yi could only pull little fatty up from the corner and draw a sword from its backpack, holding it to little fatty's neck. Don't shout! Tell me, why are you running around here at night? Little fatty, terrified, stammered for a while before explaining, I want to find the way home, but I forgot. Then why were you running around with this tattered cloth? You know it's scary at night, right? Little fatty covered his head, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I hid behind this cloth during the day and only dared to look for the path at night. Ling Yi sighed and put away its weapon. As long as it wasn't a big disturbance, that was fine. Its heart really couldn't take any more surprises. At the same time, a blue exclamation mark was automatically accepted by Ling Yi. Find the mysterious spirit's home. This was actually a quest. Ling Yi looked at little fatty again but found nothing special. He was wearing ordinary Liao clothing, any NPC on the street would be dressed like this. At most, it could be confirmed that this guy wasn't wealthy. It could only ask more questions. What's your name? I'll do a good deed and see if I can take you home. Stop running around the mountain with that tattered cloth. Home is on the mountain. I don't remember anything else. This was like going to a pharmacy to buy medicine, and when asked what you want, you say you only remember it's a capsule. It was equally frustrating. Ling Yi wanted to walk away right then. But of course, that wasn't possible. Ling Yi still had some moral principles. Besides the mountain, do you remember anything about your identity? Woodcutter? Fisherman? Merchant? Unemployed? Ling Yi could only watch as little fatty shook his head dumbly. Okay, let's try another question. Do you remember anything about water? Little fatty shook his head. What about a bamboo forest and a bamboo house? Little fatty shook his head again. Ling Yi was completely stumped. Everyone knows how vast Mount Ayaking is. Finding the home of an unknown NPC was incredibly difficult. It had been a long time since it had done such a challenging quest. Seeing Ling Yi's troubled expression, little fatty felt very guilty. Am I too stupid? I can't do anything right, I don't even know how I died or where my home is. Ling Yi smiled slightly at little fatty, then took his hand. Then I'll accompany you across all of Mount Ayakang. We'll find it eventually, won't we? I haven't given up, so don't lose heart so soon. Little fatty was almost dazzled by the smile in front of him. It was the first time someone had encouraged him like this, and his eyes welled up with tears. I won't give up. I'll remember the location of my home. Inspired by Ling Yi, little fatty looked around, trying to find something familiar in the scenery. Ah! I remember something, a huge stone floating in the sky. Hey? Ling Yi was stumped again. This description was too abstract. The only floating structure was Jade Chamber, but that was far away. Could this little fatty actually live in the city but died here? But he was clearly looking for his home in the mountains. It was too contradictory. But this was a clue, nonetheless. Ling Yi decided to give it a try. I don't know if you are familiar with Jade Chamber. It's the only huge floating rock. Let's go take a look, okay. Little fatty obediently nodded and quickly turned into a white ball. You can take me like this, benefactor. Ling Yi looked at the white ball. It was soft and slightly bouncy, truly novel. Alright, let's go to Jade Chamber. Chapter 39, Joining the Group. Currently, there is only one way to ascend to the Jade Chamber, and that is to be invited by Ning Guang. Then, go to the Pavilion of the Crescent Moon, and the secretary will take you up. Other methods, even from the highest peak with the wind field, can only fly halfway. The traveler has already fully experimented with this. Ling Yi took little fatty through different waypoints, but still, there was no place that little fatty recognized. Ling Yi even wondered if this guy was really from Liu. Another day with no results, Ling Yi could only choose to return to the hotel to rest for a night. There's a letter in the door crack? Opening the door, Ling Yi bent down to pick up the letter from the ground and opened it. What a stroke of luck. This was indeed an invitation from Ning Guang. So, after resting for a night, early the next morning, Ling Yi arrived at the Pavilion of the Crescent Moon. After presenting the envelope, Ling Yi went straight to the top of the Jade Chamber. Of course, Ling Yi also didn't forget the side quest. Little fatty, do you recognize this place? Little fatty shook back and forth in Ling Yi's sleeve, indicating that he did not recognize this place. This made Ling Yi even more puzzled. He had practically walked every inch of Liu. Could it be that little fatty's home was in some domain? Before Ling Yi could think more, he was led into the room by the secretary. Just like in the game, the luxurious furnishings filled the room, leaving only a simple office table in front. And Ning Guang was sitting behind it, writing something. Before Ling Yi could speak, Ning Guang handed out a piece of letter paper. I think you might be curious why I invited you up, but perhaps you will understand if you look at this. Ling Yi slowly opened the letter paper, and as he read the words on it, his eyes widened slightly. Could this be something an intelligence agency would say? What do you mean by suspected of killing the god of Geo? That's too much of a compliment. The more Ling Yi read, the more absurd it seemed. Ling Yi could barely admit to being powerful, but assassinating the god of Geo? Is that something that can be done just by having the power? And supporting Zhongli to take the position was even more absurd. Just because he had interacted with Zhongli before coming to Liu, such speculation was made. Isn't that a bit too abstract? As for the last point, colluding with the Fatui was the most unjust. He clearly had a relationship with Child where they avoided each other, so how did it become ambiguous? Ling Yi stealthily looked up at Ning Guang. The omnipotent Ning Guang shouldn't believe such absurd statements, right? Ning Guang, you wouldn't believe such nonsense, would you? Ning Guang smiled slightly, gesturing for Ling Yi to sit down and talk in detail. I'm not looking for you because of these rumors, but because who spread these rumors to divert attention. As soon as Ning Guang said this, the first person Ling Yi thought of was Child. After all, he had only offended the Fatui, such a large organization. But thinking carefully, would Child give such an order? Ling Yi did not believe that such words would come from Child's hand, especially since he had just signed a non-aggression pact with him. But he really hadn't had much contact with other forces. So, Ling Yi could only wait for Ning Guang to give an answer. It's me. Ling Yi almost fell off the table. This is also the reason I came to find you. I want to cooperate with you, to draw the Fachui's attention to this side. Of course, I will give you a satisfactory price, and I will also help you clear your name afterward. Ling Yi still had some doubts and asked, first, I don't think these rumors are very credible. Will the Fachui believe them? Second, why come to me? I think someone as noble as Ning Guang should not lack capable subordinates. Ning Guang stood up and went to a wooden board, which had all the event branches drawn on it. Actually, ever since you set foot in Liu, my intelligence network has received news about you. I have a general grasp of your news in Mondstadt, so I believe your strength is enough to complete my plan. As for the latter, I think I have no better choice. Anyone around me will be suspected by the Fachui. Only you, who are new, they cannot accurately grasp the information, which will make my rumors more credible. Ling Yi also thought along Ning Guang's line of thinking. With his personality, strength, and various aspects, indeed, there was no more suitable candidate than himself. Aren't you afraid that I won't agree and instead sell your plan to the Fachui? Ning Guang smiled and shook his head. I am very good at judging people. You are not that kind of person. I know this is very risky, but the return is also proportional. Ling Yi still couldn't understand Ning Guang's thought process, but this plan was indeed very interesting. The blue exclamation mark was accepted by Ling Yi again. I agree. I believe Ning Guang will arrange the follow-up well. What do I need to do? Then Ling Yi saw Ning Guang take out a thick stack of materials from behind him that could kill someone and place it in front of him. Please prepare according to the design above. Starting tomorrow morning, it's all up to you. Ling Yi, this is overwhelming. He had never seen such a thick stack of materials since the college entrance exam. Ling Yi could only say, truly deserving of Ning Guang, this was indeed meticulous. Chapter 40, Remember the Persona. 3 days later. Ling Yi strolled down the streets of Liu, holding a freshly made cup of milk tea. His gaze was wandering, his steps were light and carefree, completely relaxed, like an old man idly wandering the mortal world. Of course, it would be even better if there weren't so many eyes watching from the shadows. Ning Guang's plan was highly effective. After the forces in the shadows obtained the leaked false information through various means, they expressed deep belief in it. Consequently, whether they were the righteous side protecting Liu or the opposing side with ulterior motives, they all regarded Ling Yi as a thorn in their side, vowing to find a breakthrough through him. Ling Yi's solution to this was to appear openly on the streets, and in the busiest, most bustling parts of Liu at that. Surely, they couldn't just cut someone down in the middle of the street, right? However, Ling Yi had still underestimated the determination of the intelligence agents from all sides. For example, right now, Ling Yi was leaning back in his chair, holding a newly published Liu novel or play script, reading it with great relish. A mischievous child came running from a corner of the street, almost bumping into Ling Yi's chair as if he hadn't seen him, but still managed to knock against the milk tea on the table. Fortunately, the milk tea had a semi-sealed lid and didn't spill too much. Sorry, big sister. The child was holding a rubber ball in his hands, his eyes teary, as if he had only accidentally bumped into Ling Yi. But Ling Yi saw through the act at a glance. Because little Fatty was hiding in the shadows nearby, watching as a member of some faction or another gave this child a bag of mora to drug Ling Yi's milk tea. Ling Yi could even replay the conversation the two had in the alley. Ah, such a simple and unadorned method. Ling Yi's expression remained unchanged as he waved his hand, indicating the child could leave. It's fine, it's fine. I am the great philanthropist of Mondstadt, after all. Here, I'll give you this new beverage I just made. Be more careful next time. Ling Yi always remembered the persona Ning Guang had crafted for him. He then fished out a newly made Jueyun chili-flavored milk tea from his backpack and shoved it into the child's hands. Since this milk tea would ultimately end up back with the mastermind behind the scenes, why not take the opportunity to advertise? The child was a bit confused, but following the instructions of the person behind the scenes, he took the milk tea. Ling Yi happily waved goodbye to the child, his enthusiasm almost resembling that of a human trafficker. And this was already the third person who had come to probe Ling Yi today. Ling Yi hadn't realized the waters in Liu ran so deep. With just this little bait Ning Guang had cast, several groups couldn't resist jumping out. What baffled Ling Yi the most were the merchants. It was as if Ling Yi was some kind of hot commodity. He had even refused one who came seeking an endorsement. Truly the most absurd thing in the world. However, the reason Ling Yi hadn't made a move yet was naturally because the main player hadn't appeared. Fachui intelligence agents, where are you? Actually, Ling Yi was a bit apprehensive. Would Tartaglia really believe such an outlandish rumor? Moreover, he seemed to have personally admitted before that he was a familiar of Morux. If he was a familiar, how could he possibly be the murderer of the god of Geo? But Ning Guang had given Ling Yi an idea. When the Geo Archon met with misfortune, Ling Yi wasn't in Liu. Calculating the time, Ling Yi was adventuring in the vast desert of Sumura back then, so in the eyes of the Fachui, he should have been considered missing. That created a fuzzy timeline for the assassination of the Geo Archon. Furthermore, although Ling Yi claimed to be a familiar of the Geo Archon, he never said he couldn't harbor rebellious thoughts. Besides, the Geo Archon was immensely powerful. If it wasn't a close associate launching a sneak attack from behind, success shouldn't have been so easily achieved. Ling Yi had to admire Ning Guang's storytelling ability. If she wrote a book with this, it would surely make a fortune. Probably even the divine priestess of the Ye publishing house would applaud it. Elsewhere, Tartaglia sat at his desk, frowning deeply as he looked over the newly submitted intelligence report for the day, picking up and putting down his pen repeatedly. Where did this information come from? The intelligence officer below replied, our people noticed unusual movements on the side of the Kixing. They were extensively gathering identity information on this adventurer named Ling Yi. Subsequently, the Kixing urgently classified and encrypted Ling Yi's data, but our undercover agent managed to intercept a copy. The credibility is very high. Tartaglia waved his subordinate away, holding this hard-won information and pondering something alone. Finally, he took out that hand-drawn picture by Ling Yi from a drawer. Is this the pit you drew for me? Another pleasant day passed, and Ling Yi returned to the inn. As expected, the strand of hair he had placed in the door crack had fallen. But these intelligence agents were quite meticulous. At least, to Ling Yi's eyes, everything in the inn room looked exactly the same as when he left. There was even a kind soul who had helped clean the room. What a great person! In the inn room, following Ning Guang's instructions, Ling Yi had also placed a dragon-shaped doll of Rex Lapis, hiding inside it a piece of rock fragment obtained from who knows where. Ling Yi reached out and felt it. It seemed these intelligence agents had some professional ethics, at least the fragment was still there. After tidying up the room a bit, Ling Yi immersed himself in his milk tea enterprise, experimenting with different ratios of toppings. Finally, he packed up a portion and sent it all to Xiangling, then selected 2 cups he thought tasted best to send to the traveler. Lastly, he produced a large batch of finished milk tea for restocking. Perhaps due to the effectiveness of Ling Yi's advertising over the past couple of days, the milk tea at Wanman restaurant was now sold out every day, having become the new generation's best-selling beverage. Ling Yi had even seen quite a few Fatui members holding it on the main streets. As a result, after 10 a.m., Ling Yi had to return to his room to make another batch for restocking. Knock, knock, knock. The urgent knocking interrupted Ling Yi's train of thought. So, who would it be this time? The traveler? Tartaglia? Surely not Zhongli? Although mentally prepared, when he opened the door, Ling Yi froze on the spot. Hey? Son. Xiao stood at the door, also not expecting to see this adventurer named Ling Yi again in such a manner. After a 2-second silence, he slowly spoke, I am here on behalf of the Adepti of Jueyunkars to speak with you. Ling Yi also snapped back to reality, a genuine smile appearing on his face. Please, come in. However, as soon as Xiao entered, he seemed a bit uneasy. After glancing behind Ling Yi, he fell even more silent. Following Xiao's gaze, Ling Yi looked behind himself. That enormous dragon-shaped doll was sitting peacefully in the middle of the bed, its gaze burning intently at Xiao and himself. I can explain. I'm not a pervert who sleeps hugging a dragon doll. I just forgot to put it away after checking the fragment earlier. Just as he was about to explain, Ling Yi was forced to close his mouth again, repeatedly reminding himself, remember the persona. Even if exposing it to Xiao might not matter, the people eavesdropping and monitoring from the shadows wouldn't let this opportunity slip. Ling Yi had no choice but to tilt his head back, attempting to look at the other person with his nostrils. May I ask what advice the 3-eyed, 5 manifestations adeptus has for me today?